What's up, everybody, and welcome to the Golf 360 podcast. I'm the host, Pete Popovich. So you may be asking yourself, what is Golf 360? And Golf 360 is a show that was designed to introduce you to people associated with the game of golf to help you improve not only at your game, but also your life. Almost all of our guests are from within the industry in some way, shape, or form, but some of the guests we have are from outside the industry, and it mainly revolves around the business world with a few others scattered in here and there. Now, all of the guests that we have a few things in common. One, they all were highly successful and accomplished in their field. Two, each has something to pass along that will help you in your game and your life. And three, they were all more than willing to give back by passing along the things that they use to help them in their career, and even some of the mistakes that they made so that others don't make them in their journey. So I hope you find listening to them as enjoyable as I did interviewing them, and that each and every one of you benefits from the information that they so willingly and graciously pass along. This podcast is brought to you in part by Just Thrive Probiotic. You may be surprised to learn that your digestive system is the key to creating and maintaining the quality of your physical, mental, and emotional health, and it's one of the body's most essential systems. That's why the majority of nutritionists today highly recommend probiotics as an indispensable nutritional supplement. As a discriminating consumer, you've probably been searching for a probiotic that is proven, potent, and effective, and you found it. Just Thrive is your best choice for maintaining a healthy lifestyle. Just Thrive Probiotic captures the power of hundreds of thousands of years of nature's design with a specialized bacillus strain formulation that guarantees survivability through the stomach and upper digestive system. Supports optimum gut health, digestive health, immune health, and delivers antioxidants. Great for adults, kids, and the whole family. Use promo code GOLF360 at www.thriveprobiotic.com for 10% off your order. This podcast is brought to you in part by Old South Golf Links. A short ride across a bridge from Hilton Head Island is one of the area's finest golf courses and a hidden treasure. Set up on towering pines and ancient oaks with sweeping marsh vistas, truly makes Old South Golf Links a one-of-a-kind golfing experience. The Clyde Johnson design was named one of the top 10 new public courses when it opened, and it also takes full advantage of the natural beauty of the Low Country. Old South is a fun and unique challenge for golfers of every skill level and a favorite of both locals and visitors. Whether it's your first time here or you're a regular, you'll be treated and feel like family. From the bag drop to check-in at the fully stocked pro shop with both men's and women's apparel, to breakfast or lunch before or after your round, the staff is always ready and willing to help. Experience for yourself why Old South is one of the premier golf courses in the Hilton Head area and why it will quickly become a favorite of yours too. Visit them in person or online at www.oldsouthgolf.com, or to make it tee time, simply call the pro shop at 843-785-5353. In today's world of golf improvement, nobody can deny that your fitness plays a very large role in your ability to get to that next level. So whether you're a beginner trying to break 100, you're a scratch golfer trying to break par, or you're a touring professional trying to maintain your card, win your first event, or win a major, physical fitness plays a huge role in your ability to do that. And today's guest is going to explain a lot of different things on how to make sure that your body is ready to handle the rigors of playing, improving, and what you can do to make it play to the best of your potential. His name is Michael Carroll, and he is from Fit for Golf in Irvine, California. Michael is originally from Cork, Ireland, where he was educated and got his strength and conditioning degree. He got honors degrees in exercise, sports, and science. He is a TPI Level 3 instructor and is an accredited strength and conditioning coach with the UK Strength and Conditioning Association. Now, Michael uses what he refers to as the 5 pillars of training, and we get into all 5 of those in today's episode. We also talk about the things that all people need to be doing when they go into the gym, how they can utilize them through Michael's Fit for Golf app. Was an extremely simple and easy to use app that anybody can utilize. We talk about golf-specific training. We talk about what you should not be doing in the gym. And then we really get into depth on what everyone is looking to do, which is how to gain more distance through your training protocols. So should you train for speed? Should you train for strength? Or should you be training for power? Ballistic training, dynamic training. We go over all these things and how each of them play an integral role in your ability to play well and to get more distance. So Michael is a great guy. You're going to love him. I really enjoyed talking to him and hearing what he had to say. So without further hesitation, let's get into the conversation. All right, we're rocking and rolling. All right, everybody. I'm here with Mike Carroll, Twitter handle Fit for Golf. Is on Facebook at the same. Mike, thank you for joining from another hemisphere and around the world. Thanks for making this time.
No worries. Thanks a million, Pete. I'm more than happy to come on, and thank you for having me.
Yeah, I think we kind of got introduced informally through Andrew Rice when you would listen to his podcast. So thanks for listening.
Yeah, no worries. I'm a big Andrew Rice fan, so if I ever see an article or a podcast, I make sure to listen in, and it was something I enjoyed, so thought it should be shared.
Yeah, Andrew's a great guy. Really enjoyed talking to him. I hope we can have him on again. So you're currently at a seminar/conference over in Ireland?
Well, I wouldn't say that. I'm in Ireland on holiday for 2 weeks. I did a workshop on Tuesday night, so 2 days ago. It's just a one-night event. I linked up with a college called Setanta College, who do a lot of strength and conditioning and fitness education in Ireland and online. So we teamed up, and it was good. We had 45 people attended, a mixture of golfers, golf coaches, fitness trainers, physiotherapists, with some coaches then just involved in other rotational sports. And it was good. I enjoyed it. Just did some kind of basic talk on how different types of training can transfer to sport. Well, golf really, but they apply to the other sports as well.
You focus primarily in golf, don't you?
I do now. Slightly earlier in my career, I did probably about a 50-50 mix between other sports, general population, and golf. And then as I got a little bit more interested in the golf training side of things and went down the TPI education route, I started enjoying the golf stuff more and more. And now pretty much everything that I'm doing is golf.
You grew up in Ireland? I would have to assume with your accent.
Yeah. So I was born in Ireland and lived here until 3 years ago, pretty much bang on 3 years ago. And then I moved to the US. So it was the beginning of October 2016 I moved over, and have been there since.
How did you get from Ireland all the way to California? I think you're in Newport Beach, right?
I'm in Newport Beach in California, yeah. Very simply, I saw a Twitter post from the TPI Twitter page advertising the need for a strength and conditioning coach specializing in golf in a facility in Orange County, California. And when I read the tweet, it was about 5:45 a.m. in November in Ireland, so it was freezing cold, lashing rain. I was just after opening up the gate to the gym that I was working in, and I thought that would be nice for a change, get out to Southern California for a while. So TPI actually shared the post for a place called Hansen Fitness for Golf, which is owned and run by Mike Hansen. Mm-hmm. So I got in touch with Mike, and we did a couple of talks over Skype and organized to come out. And that's basically what happened. It was actually it was about eight or 10 months or so after I originally spoke to him and agreed that it was something we'd try and do that I went out. I was working with a sports team here in Ireland, a Gaelic football team that I wanted to finish out the season with as their strength and conditioning coach. And their season ran until September, and I came out once that finished.
That's awesome. Was that your first venture, so to speak, outside of Ireland? I mean, you grew up there? Did you live there?
I lived here all my life. I'd had a couple of trips outside of Ireland. I did 2 summers in the US. So if you're in university in Ireland, you're able to get what's called a J1 visa to travel to the United States in between your years of college and spend the summer there, which is really, really good. So I did one of those on the Jersey Shore, just with a couple of friends, which was which is non-work related. Just four 19-year-olds from Ireland living in Bradley Beach and Belmar area on the Jersey Shore, if anyone's familiar with that. And then slightly more on the professional side of things, 2 years later, I did an internship in Cressy Sports Performance.
Mm-hmm.
So Eric Cressy would be a pretty well-known strength and conditioning coach who specializes with baseball players. And the baseball stuff had a huge. Any of the rotational sports have huge crossover. Like it's very similar things that you're going to be training from a physical standpoint. There is some differences, but the principles are very similar. And I just really enjoyed his work. I'd been studying it for a few years. They have a really, really good internship program. And I went there for 3 months in the summer of 2013.
Where was that at?
It was great. That was in Hudson, Massachusetts. So it's about 45 minutes inland from Boston.
Mm-hmm.
Tiny little place, but they're growing pretty steadily. They had just the Hudson location when I was there. They opened one in Florida, probably, I don't know for sure, but I would say maybe 3 years ago or so, 3 or 4 years ago. And they're opening a new one. I can't remember where. It might be in Arizona or Texas, but they are opening a third one. So they're going pretty well.
And they focus on baseball?
Yeah, they have some other athletes. It's primarily baseball.
You know, it's kind of interesting. You see people going outside of disciplines more now than you did, or at least that was mainstream, let's say 10, 15, 20 years ago. Baseball being one, as you said, a rotary sport, and I've always said that. Look, I've always told students that really the biggest difference between a baseball swing and a golf swing, if you fundamentally, is one's on a horizontal plane, one's on a tilted plane. I mean, there's not a whole lot more. You can break it down. Someone like you, or if you want to get technical about it. But I think you look at. I think George Gankis was even talking about how he went to a facility out there and was studying baseball swing.
Yeah, and I think it's slightly different as well. Like you can never separate them completely, but a technical coach, like a golf instructor, and somebody who's primarily more involved in, say, the physical side of things, they're going to be looking at it from slightly different viewpoints too.
Mm-hmm.
Like I'm more interested in, say, the physical capacities are involved. So the fact that it's a very low duration, high power activity, the way that we're using our body to produce the forces, that's really more important to me than the fact that the plane is slightly different. Like for example, something that probably wouldn't be as useful to a golf instructor, but I've taken like really good lessons from, is some of the throwing events in track and field. Even the pitching in golf is huge.
Mm-hmm.
Stuff like the forehand in tennis, and even pitching in baseball. There's a lot of crossover there too.
Yeah, I think Tim Cook, who was World Long Drive, he won the Worlds twice. I think he was a minor league pitcher, had gotten to a very high level in pitching. A friend of mine worked with him for quite a number of years, and I think he's the one that told me that.
Yeah, it's no surprise. Like if you get an athlete who has the kind of physical profile that's suited to throwing or hitting, and they have the skill for golf, like they're more than likely going to have the necessary materials to have really high club head speed and do something like long drive.
I don't want to jump ahead too quick, but I got to ask you since we're on the topic. Do you see, because ground reaction forces are so big in golf now, everyone's trying to push off the ground so hard, but do you really see that? I don't see it. Maybe you do in home run hitters, where they're not really pushing off the ground, even though I think they're with TrackMan now transferring over to baseball, they're trying to hit up on the ball more. So strikeouts have gone up, but home runs have gone up.
I don't know, like I have done no study really on like the ground forces being produced in baseball. I would imagine that there is quite a significant amount of ground force being produced, but just thinking for about a second, I'd say one of the other things that's really important with baseball though is the ball coming at you at such speed.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if you need to create as much force yourself to create the velocity on the ball, if that makes sense.
Right, the energy transfer is much different from
exactly. Yeah.
Okay, that makes total sense.
I would imagine though, like if you're measuring, say, a baseball bat swing speed, I'd be confident without studying it that there would be a relationship between the forces being produced by the legs into the ground and the swing speed.
Yeah, it would only make sense.
Yeah, I think so.
Did you grow up playing golf in Ireland?
I did. Yeah, I started playing golf when I was 12. Played a couple of years of pitch and putt before that, but I was probably a good example of a jack of all trades, kind of master of none athlete growing up. Played sort of everything in the different seasons and stuff like
Mm-hmm.
that. Played golf like relatively seriously, not extremely seriously or anything, but practiced a decent amount and took some coaching and played competitively and stuff like that. Um, Up until I was about 16 or 17. And then as I was finishing, we call it secondary school here. It's high school really in the US. My final year there and my 4 years in college, I actually didn't play golf at all. I was playing quite a lot of what's called Gaelic football, and I was studying. And then when I finished college and moved back to my hometown in Cork, I started playing golf again, and that's about 4 or 5 years ago now. So I've been playing reasonably on and off since.
What was your area of study in
I
fitness?
did I did sport and exercise science in a place called the University of Limerick.
Mm-hmm.
So what's interesting about that course, like, is that you don't. It's a science course. So like you're learning physiology, biomechanics, biology, biochemistry. Like you're not really taught how to write training programs as such. You don't do that much in practical setting in the gym. You do little bits of coaching, but nothing crazy. It's really you're getting the kind of base sciences and developing your understanding. And it's nearly up to you then to specialize in the area that you're suited to or that you want to pursue. Like for example, there's no way you're coming out of, even though it's a really good program, it's a 4 year bachelor's degree. There's very few people even coming out of it that end up going into strength and conditioning. Like some people are working in physiology labs, some people are working in statistics, some people are working in sports psychology. Like it's very, very broad, but I like the base that it gives you in kind of everything. And then if you're interested in developing into one niche afterwards, you have a good platform to do it.
Yeah, that's what it
But
sounds like.
you'll definitely need outside experience while you're in college or do some continuing education afterwards. I was working in a gym from my first year there, training people. So I was always kind of tying back in the science stuff we were learning, and I was getting the practical experience outside of there.
What was the draw into the fitness? I mean, like sometimes kids growing up that have bad allergies become immunologists, or if they have asthma, they become pulmonary, doctors. Did
It
you have
was
something like that?
Yeah, it was just the environment in the household I grew up in, really. So my dad was in the Navy for 25 years, and as I was growing up, he was still active in the Navy,
Mm-hmm.
and he played soccer, Gaelic football, and rugby. Was quite good. My mother is a black belt in karate. My older
You
brother,
better not talk
he's
back
three
to
years
mom.
old. No, there's none of that. Yeah. Or dad. um, my older brother was a very good athlete, the Gaelic sports, soccer. My younger brother is a very good athlete. I'm probably the worst athlete in the family. Um, but yeah, growing up, there was always something on, always some sports stuff. And then as I was playing sport, I got a little bit more. I was always interested in like the kind of fitness capacities for the different sports. And I suppose that peaked a little bit more so when I went to secondary school. I started doing athletics. And obviously, that's a bit different to playing field sports where, there's a big skill element. You can kind of get away with, not being in super good shape if you're extremely skillful or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And same in golf. But in the athletics, you're always working against a stopwatch or a distance or whatever. And the training in that, I was pretty interested in. And then I noticed how much fitter I was playing my field sports. And I was like, man, that's interesting how, a different type of training can have an effect on a different sport. And then my older brother actually did the same program that I ended up doing in the University of Limerick, except he was 4 years ahead of me in school. So as he was doing that, I was midway through high school, and he was kind of telling me little bits and pieces about what he was studying, and I got interested in it more so then, and started doing some of my own reading. And I knew kind of a long way before finishing high school that was what I was going to try and do when I finished college.
Is your brother
or when I finished
still
high
in it?
school. He's actually gone into physiotherapy, which is physical therapy in the US. He went to Australia after he finished college. He did a little bit of work as a trainer over there, like just a general personal trainer over there to kind of get some steady income. But he also did some work in Australian rules football. And while he was there, he kind of said he'd like to have a better understanding of the injury and rehab side. So he went back to the UK. He went to Essex in England and did a master's in physiotherapy. And he's been practicing as a physiotherapist in London since.
Nice. It's pretty much in the family. Very active.
Yeah, exactly. No, definitely. It was just kind of growing up.
You have to ask him. One guy that's going to come on, we're just trying to figure out scheduling. As you know, it's not the easiest.
Yeah.
Dr. Greg Half, I've mentioned him before in the podcast. He wrote the 6th edition of Periodization of Training. With
Greg Half?
Yes. You know.
Oh, yeah. Of course.
Yeah, I've read his book many years ago, and he and I actually corresponded about 12 years ago. I was trying to put together a junior academy, and he had just, I think, he had just a couple years prior left West Virginia University to go to Australia, and we were corresponding via email and had a lot of good discussions as well as you can over type.
But, yeah, he'd be a very interesting guy to get on. Like, he's somebody who'd have, I think, interesting views on, I don't know if he's a golfer, if he follows kind of what goes on in the golf training world, but he'd be a really good guy to talk to about kind of training principles.
Yeah, exactly. One of the talks that we had was, he said, "What do you do your balance training on disc and balls, or do you do it with Olympic lifting?" And I said, "Well, it used to be with the pink pads and the balls and all that." And I said, in the last couple of years, gone Olympic lifting. He said, "Good, because if you're a golfer," and he goes, "I've tested everything." He said, "The deadlift and the squat are the two best things you could do for your golf game." And I thought at that time, it was like I said, 10, 12 years ago, there weren't many people talking about deadlifting and squatting for golf. They're like, "No, you don't want to hurt yourself." He was one of the first ones I heard that brought that up.
Yeah, like it's hard to pin, one or two exercises as being the best things. I'd say they're definitely beneficial, and his background as well is a lot of, I think, Olympic lifting and the bigger barbell lifts. That's where a lot of his research has been based, looking at the power. I don't want to misquote, and looking at the power production and those things and how they transfer to different athletic movements, basically. And we know that like ground force is hugely beneficial, being able to produce more force, and even those kind of bigger explosive lifts, because they're so good for teaching you how to recruit all of your motor units, your muscle fibers. There's effects that are a little bit more general in nature that are very beneficial for the golf athlete as such, learning how to express power, learning how to recruit muscle fibers that you previously wouldn't have, and getting your nervous system more efficient, basically.
Right. So you mentioned your folks being very involved and very active people. Were there any, and who basically kind of served as mentors? Was there anybody outside the family that kind of mentored you and helped you along?
100%. Yeah. My brother was definitely one of them, just being a little bit ahead of me. And then the next kind of really important ones were, there's a gym in Cork it's moved facility since, but it was 5 minutes walk from my house. It was called Fitness Works. And I was a member there since I was about 15 or 16 and trained there. And what was great about that place is that, and it doesn't always happen, is the owners of the gym were also there training people every day. And they were all hugely into athletics, had a really good sporting background. And so the training that was going on there, and the kind of environment they created was much more suited to people interested in sort of athletics, as opposed to just joining your local LA or Planet Fitness or whatever, and it's, more generic big box style. So I'd always be talking to them, and they'd give you some kind of hints and tips. And when they would watch me training, they knew I was sort of interested in the application to sports, and it wasn't, just trying to get as big as possible or bodybuilding or. But cut a long story short, I became quite friendly with them after my first year in UL. When I returned from the Jersey Shore, I started working there. So I used to return. So I went to college in Limerick and lived in Cork, which is about a 90-minute drive. And every weekend, I used to come back to Cork and work in Fitness Works gym on Saturdays and Sundays. And while I was there, they were very good to me in terms of, like, I was thrown right in at the deep end, assessing and programming for mostly general population clients, but you're still getting very good exposure to working with people. And I was there basically throughout my college. And when I eventually set up as a sole trader on my own, I stayed there, using there as my base, even when I was doing more like the Fit for Golf stuff and taking in my own clients. So I ended up being in that gym for about 5 or 6 years before I moved to the US, probably about 5 years. And they were really, really helpful. Like, I still stay in touch with all of them regularly. And since I've been back, I've called into the gym a couple of times just to train. I've had breakfast with them, and they were hugely influential.
Sounds like an extended family, really good people.
Oh, like, it's great. They're really, really good. Like, we're all going to one of the staff's wedding next week. It's really, really good. Like, they're friends as opposed to just, ex-colleagues or kind of mentors, basically.
Right, and it sounds like they didn't just let you come there, and they obviously saw the interest level you have and wanted to nurture that or help you along, so that they have that as I would assume if you're in the physical world that you're looking to help people, right? Because otherwise, why would you try to rehab somebody or get them stronger, whatever? But it sounds like they really took an interest, or at least they saw the interest that you had, and like, yeah, this kid's he's doing what's asked. Let's invest some more time in him.
Yeah, I think so. And probably what they kind of notice as well is they see that I think a lot of my thought processes aligned with theirs in terms of we all played sports. So the training that we were doing wasn't just a means to an end in terms of staying in shape as such, which is obviously great too. But like, we were always like, we all trained like the general population or whatever, but we were all really interested in like how training in a, say, gym setting away from your sport can enhance your sports performance, or help decrease injury. And that's where I suppose our thought processes and a lot of our kind of discussions centered around. Used to always be talking about just program design or exercises, or basically anything that came up, we discuss and argue about, I suppose, as opposed to debate even sometimes. But it's good, and they're all high level athletes in their own right. So they've gone through it, and they've all worked with high level athletes. So there's a real, like, it's unreal. The people that are training there as general population clients. I was there this morning training myself, and the people that are training with them probably don't even realize the wealth of knowledge that they're dealing with, that they're getting in a regular personal training session. When you compare it to the baseline level of education and knowledge and experience that's needed to be a personal trainer, and you compare it to the level of knowledge and quality of service that they're giving, like, it's cool. It's good to see.
When you had you were not forced, but they had you doing assessments and threw you into the deep end really quick. I'm sure that wasn't very comfortable, but it's probably the best thing for you.
Yeah, like it. So it's
really gets you out of your comfort level.
Yeah, there's a steep learning curve there, definitely. But what I kind of realized pretty quickly is, for a couple of years before that, I'd still been kind of like writing programs just on the side for buddies, and I've been writing programs for myself for like a few years. What I realized pretty quickly is that when someone comes to you, all they really care about is, can you help them with what they're looking to improve? And your knowledge level doesn't need to be massive for that. Now, if I reviewed the training programs or some of the assessment protocols I used back then versus now, I'm sure I'd say like I could have done a way better job on that or whatever. But it was definitely definitely a big learning curve. And as you said, getting thrown into the deep end, you kind of sink or swim usually, I suppose. And if you get through it, you thrive a little bit.
Yeah, I had a friend of mine. He got to be a really good teacher really quick, and I asked him when I said, how did you get? I mean, all of us were kind of at a par level coming out of school,
Hmm.
and then he got really good one summer. And I said, what the hell did you do? Would you read? Would you follow? And he's like, well, the pro that he worked for told him he was going to teach that summer for free. So, and the pro would supplement his income. He was going to pay him some more, so he's not burning his time. But
Yeah.
it wasn't a waste, right? Because he got to really learn. If you're teaching for free, now it was different back in the '80s than it is now, of course. But if you're teaching for free, you're teaching a lot. So he really got to see what worked, what didn't, change his thinking, his style, and so forth. And he said it was one of the best things that ever happened for him. Now we all caught
Yeah.
up later, but I mean, he really took a massive jump that summer.
No, that's yeah, like it's sometimes hard to beat doing, you know what I mean? Like studying and research and stuff like that is great, but extra hours, extra practice of applying what you're doing makes a big
Yeah,
difference,
at
I
some
think.
point you got to jump into the real world and apply it, see what works, what
Exactly. And
doesn't.
yeah, what I think is very important too in training, not that it has to be done, I think it helps, but I think the kind of biggest, the most I've learned from training clients is training myself. Like any exercise I teach a client or any training program I put them through, I know exactly how it feels or what the like where the technique is likely to break down,
Hmm.
even just like the volume of the training. Now, obviously, it's different. Like, it's not going to feel the same to someone who's never trained and is, at a different level of fitness to somebody who's been training a little bit better. But like, it just definitely speeds up the process in terms of if you're trying to coach someone, and it's the same with golf instructors. Like, I know not every golf instructor is the best golf instructor in the world, but most of them played to a high level at some stage and tried to get as good as possible. So then when they're coaching, they know the sort of pitfalls. They've probably been there themselves a little bit.
Right. I think even Brandel, as much as he's Brandel Chambly's polarizing. I think one of the things he mentioned was a lot of the top instructors had been very good players in their own right. So it's
Yeah.
not just the X's and O's; it's the application. The real, you obviously have science, but you also have the application.
Well, yeah, something that I've heard a few times, a lot of people probably have, is that the best coaches are averagely talented athletes who tried to get as good as possible. So they experimented with lots of different things, lots of
Hmm.
different methods. That's why it's pointless when people are like, "Oh, I saw LeBron doing this certain workout. Like that must be the workout you're supposed to do." Like our grandmothers could have trained LeBron James, and he'd be the best. You know what I mean? Like it makes no
He's
sense. The
6'8",
person,
260, and lightning quick speed. I mean,
you know what I mean?
yeah.
Exactly. Or it's the same with like say whoever like Tiger or Jack Nicklaus did this, and who cares? Like you know what I mean? They're probably going to be great anyway.
Yeah, that's an
Or
innate
or some
ability.
exactly or some yeah, but like it's the people who have maybe weren't like my favorite example is Padraig Harrington. Like Padraig, from what I've heard, would be the first and when I've listened to him or read what he said, like he wasn't particularly gifted naturally when he started playing. You
Hmm.
know what I mean? Or there was always people when he was growing up, they would have thought like he was a higher class. Like Harrington was no Rory McIlroy. I'll put it that way. You know what I mean? From
Yeah,
what I've
wasn't
heard
a
of when
prodigy
Harrington was
level
growing
at
up.
a junior level.
Yeah, exactly. But an absolute grinder. You know what I mean? He did everything he could to try and eke the last level of performance out. They're the type of people that you probably want to hear, like, okay, what was his progression on the way up? I think Zach Johnson's another one. I think I listened to him saying he wasn't that good in college, but then he, kept working away, working away. Now he may not be the best example, like physically, he's not a bomber or anything, but if you're watching what the world's best and the most talented do, that doesn't really apply to most people because they can be great in spite of what they do in their practice and training.
Hmm.
Like their training and practice might actually be bad for them, but because they're so good, you don't see it. Whereas you might have someone who was way lower on the talent level, doesn't get as good as them because they just don't have that in them. But actually, the work they did was way more productive.
Oh, going through the mini tour ranks and up to what is now the Corn Ferry, and when I was playing, you saw a lot of extremely talented people that you'd look at and say, well, why are they not playing it? And why aren't they in the top 10 in the world? But they had been so talented for so long that they almost didn't learn how to grind, or get a practice program. I mean, like you said, that their talent just carried them. And then, but you get to a certain point and a certain level, your talent isn't going to carry you through. Now there are the top couple percent, the Dustin Johnsons and guys like that. Not saying he hasn't worked. The guy's worked his butt off. But
Yeah.
I mean, he got there, and I don't think his practice was his main focus back when he got his tour card.
And there's players can never get to his level no matter what they do. Is the other thing.
Exactly. I always say Tiger was
any athlete. Yeah.
Tiger was the hardest working, most talented person on the tour. Right, he had the most talent, and he probably outworked everybody.
Yeah,
and as a result, he's as odd as this is to say, he's probably an overachiever. But I know maybe someone's listening to kick back and say, "But look, I mean, the guy didn't just rest on his talent," and I think that was the genius of Earl, not ever letting. He probably saw in Tiger, and I think you mentioned early on, the kid's got the ability to change the golf world, which he did, but he also didn't rest on that laurel.
Yeah.
What would some of the things that the group at that gym that let you come in and helped you practice and learn and so forth, was there anything that they taught you that stuck with you that you still use today?
It's a good question. I'm trying to think. I'm sure there's like stuff going back that they would have mentioned to me that I still follow or still use. I think the big thing that I learned from them more than anything else, to be honest, is the environment they created in their gym, which is like less than kind of exercises and programming, because I don't think that's that hard to figure out. Like if you've been sort of studying and researching and applying yourself for a while, you're going to get reasonably good at that, or at least you should. But what I thought was actually kind of cool this morning was, so it's been 3 years since I left for the US. And when I was working in that gym, like you're there Monday to Friday, you pretty much learn off the schedule of who's coming in training with each trainer because you get used to it. So 3 years removed, I'm back in there today. It's Tuesday at 9 a.m. And I was like, I wonder, will Jenny, Canis, Dave, and Mike be in today? And of course they were. You know what I mean? They all arrive at 8:55, start doing their warm up. Trainers come in. There's a bit of chatting, bit of jaffing, bit of joking, and then they get into their workout. And like, if the person's not finding value and if the environment isn't right, there's so many trainers and so many gyms that they can go wherever they want. But because of the environment they've created, people just keep coming back. Like their client base is just so loyal. And it was funny then, as the hour rolled over, like the next hour came in, and again it was the same people who were there 3 and 4 and 5 and 6 years ago when I was there. It was like time stopped there. People were. It was just the same thing, which is great. So
it sounds like they got a great culture, as well as great information.
That was probably the thing. And that's there's a lot of talk of whether it's in golf instruction or fitness is the blend of the science and the art of coaching, and they're hard to separate. But that's what I got from them most, I think, is developing a culture that people enjoy, people are learning. Nobody really cares like how good the training is if they don't enjoy coming. Like if they're not looking forward to it and they're dreading it, then the training program is not going to be successful. Like going to a great golf instructor that your views don't align with, or you don't believe what he's telling you, even if it is correct, are useful, you're probably not going to do so well with it. Especially
in golf, if golf is for enjoyment, you're taking valuable time away from your family or what have you, and you're not having fun. Well, what the hell? I mean, you're defeating the whole purpose.
Yeah.
What was there anything that you were taught or in school that you didn't quite believe in that now you found out you were correct and maybe the schooling was wrong? And I'll give you an example. There's a Dr. Wheel, I think that Wheel, natural doctor out of Tucson. And I was listening to him one time, And he went to medical school at Harvard, and he was thinking to himself a lot of time. He's like, I wouldn't want to be treated the way that they're teaching me to treat people. And that's how he kind of segued, I think, into natural medicine, holistic training, and so forth. So, was there anything that you were taught in your education that you're like, well, I don't know if that's quite right, and you later found out you were correct?
I don't so much think there was anything I thought that was incorrect. The What I've said to a few people, the biggest thing that I think I've taken away from the 4 year college program is like the fact that it was a science course is sort of a level of critical thinking in that you don't just accept or refute information because somebody tells you it.
Mm-hmm.
You're a little bit more inquisitive and investigative. You're thinking, like, is that actually true? Like, is that factual? Or like, is that useful or not? Like, not everything's black and white. But like, there basically a simpler way of putting that is if somebody tells you something, there needs to be a rationale for it. Or if I'm creating a training program, or if someone else, or if I'm analyzing a training program somebody else has created, it's not just good or bad. It's the why behind it. Like, what's the cause? What's the effect?
Right.
What is their thought process? It can't just be this is what so and so said. He's trained whoever, so you should do it. It's like he needs to be able to explain why this is in there, why it's useful, how it's part of the plan. And when you're in a science program and you're kind of looking at scientific evidence, you're dealing with the hypothesis stuff. Is it proven correct or incorrect? And that's what I think is what I took most from it, to be honest.
Is there anything you were 100% sure of when you got out of school that now you know is completely wrong? You're like, there's no way that I'm wrong on this, and now you look back like, Jesus, how did I ever say something like that?
I don't think there was anything I was that convinced of. Some of my thoughts on training and what's important have definitely changed a little bit. Um, just because I enjoyed it, I probably put too much emphasis on getting as strong as possible, thinking that there'd be a greater transfer to my sporting performance,
Mm-hmm.
and probably didn't spend enough time applying it to like on field stuff. But other than that, I don't think that was the case coming out, that I was like certain I was right about something, and I don't think I've been proven wrong, but I've adjusted my stance on stuff. I would say maybe it's less important, or more certain things being less important or more important would be a better way of putting it than blatantly right or wrong, I would say.
Yeah, it sounds like with the scientific background that at the university you went to, that kind of tends to lead it to that, where you're proving things or you're having to think about things. And that question really kind of comes from golf instruction, where as you look back at the history of instruction, I mean, you had the let's say the Bobby Jones, Ben Hogan era. Then you get in that kind of segues into the Ledbetter, the body era. They use less arms and just more of the big muscles, and then you kind of get back into now they're trying to teach similar to stationary and less lateral movement and so on. And it seems like each group that comes through that era said, no, this is the only way to do it. Yet it evolves, right?
Yeah.
And it's not so much now; it's more science based with TrackMan and what's the pad that K-Vest and they have the ability to measure everything. Where you guys had that
Mhm.
more as your founding principle of your science from the beginning. Golf was just like, okay, the ball's slicing, you need to do this.
Exactly. Yeah. Like that's what's nice about what's nice about science is when you're like a research study is one thing. Like people say, you might hear, well, I read this study and this is what it said. It's like, okay, did you check to see if there's any studies that disagree with that, or that, have slightly differing results? And then you might have to ask, well, what type of subjects did they do the study with? And are they the same level of subjects that you're working with? It's always very hard to take something that's in a scientific study and make a blanket statement from it. But what's really good about the kind of hard sciences is that you're getting sort of basic laws and principles that give you more of a framework,
Hmm.
and it still gives you space then to think about how you can apply them to the situation you're dealing with.
Oh yeah, I agree 100%.
And
I
that way,
Go ahead.
yeah, sorry, and that's something I think is important. Like obviously I'm not in golf instruction. I try to follow it a little bit, but definitely in the physical training world, you often hear people saying like, "Oh, like is this evidence based, or is this proven by research?" And it's like it's very hard to compare some of the research that you might be reading to the exact context that you're using it in. You know what I mean? Because it's not the exact same athletes. They don't have the exact same training background. You're not doing things quite the exact same way. You might have different nuances, but I think what's important is, and that goes back to the rationale that I was talking about. As long as you're following basic principles and laws, and then you have a good rationale based on, I suppose, your own experience and even gut feeling and a little bit of trial and error. That's what's most important.
Well, yeah, yeah, you see that in people's diets because you got uh, paleo diet, you got keto diet, you got all these different diets, and all of them say, or people will say, well, this one works better than this one. It's like, well, there's so many minor and small abnormalities between human beings. It's like, okay, one might work for one and not the other, and maybe we don't know why yet. Is that? I think that kind of get what
Yeah,
you're getting at.
exactly. And like what's where that kind of applies to, like I'm way more, I would say, well versed in the training side of things and the nutrition side of things. In the training stuff, like what's like where probably my background and mindset is different to people who aren't as invested in it, is something like a comment from somebody, well, this is what I do and it works for me, so they're reluctant to change. Whereas what I'm thinking is, okay, there's loads of different things that can work. Like getting like working and improving is not what we're after here. What we're trying to see is there a way of doing it differently that leads to better improvement or more improvement or improving more quickly?
Yeah,
Like
absolutely.
when people talk about training programs, like, well, I did this and I gained 10 yards. It's like, so this is good. Like, this is what I should be doing. And you're thinking, well, the reason why this worked is those elements are useful, but you're missing other elements. So it could probably be better. Like, and that's what's important when you need to watch out for when people say this works or this doesn't work. It's it's not just working. Like improvement is can come from many different ways or many different methods, but it's trying to come up with a formula that's as close to optimal as possible. It's very hard to measure what optimal is, and you'll probably never achieve it or know if you are achieving it or not. But it's trying to cover your bases so that you're not missing any kind of big ingredients that would put you on the path towards it.
Yeah, absolutely. It's interesting how people will spend $500 plus on a driver or 400 on a putter, $50 for balls, what have you. But the most important piece of equipment is their body. I mean, some would argue maybe the brain. Sports psychologists say, "But it's
Yeah,
the brain." Okay, but the brain's encompassed in the body.
yeah,
But
yeah.
but they won't come see somebody like you. They'll try to
Well,
buy a drive and get 15 extra yards. The whole thing. Distance is the big thing in today's world. But they won't come work with someone like you.
exactly. But the problem with that, Pete, is that with the driver, you can just swipe your credit card, and the driver's in your golf bag, and then you go to the golf course and you can use it.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas with physical training or golf training, it's not just the case of swiping the credit card and the improvement magically occurs. Like there's the time and effort obviously that goes into it too, which is why people don't do it as much basically.
What's the most common thing you see in assessments today? Is it tight hips and flexors and psoas because people are so sedentary in today's world, or is it something
Yeah, like
else?
that's something that we talked a little about it in that workshop on Tuesday. Something that I've noticed a lot. It's Yeah, like something that I've noticed a lot in assessments, especially in say like the mobility section of the assessment, we'll say. is internal hip rotation.
Mm-hmm.
So for a right-handed golfer, internal hip rotation is very important on your right hip in the backswing, and it's very important in your left hip on the downswing. I see nearly all the time that it's a differentiator between players of playing level. So very common to see limited internal hip rotation in higher handicap players and maybe older populations. But then not always, but usually players who are lower handicaps or college or pro players, they tend to be better at that, definitely. And then the other thing that is actually is interesting is it's not so much a mobility screen. It's mobility as a part of it, but there's also a coordination element to it. The test is called the pelvic rotation test. It's one of the exercises in the TPI movement screen. And what's interesting is that better players, they can usually demonstrate separation of their hips from their torso quite well, whereas it's something that the higher handicap player often really struggles with. And as a golf instructor, you can inform the listeners better than me, but I think from just my own understanding and watching of golfers is that and reading is that players of a better playing level can use their lower bodies and pelvis a lot differently to higher handicappers or
Oh, yeah, it's
less
night and day.
less
Right.
less high quality players, and that's something that I see a lot for definite.
Something that I always wondered about that, and you can hopefully answer this, is in that test or in the separation of the pelvic, the hips, the pelvic girdle, and so forth in the swing with better players. D- does that lead to more torque of the spine? As the lumbar spine that does not have a larger range of motion as, let's say, your thoracic or
Well,
cervical?
what you're hoping for there with that, like I haven't done in-depth studies on forces in the spine, so what I'm speaking from, I suppose the theoretical side behind it is that when you're looking at pelvis separation like that, like if you're getting a bigger separation between the pelvis and the torso,
Mm-hmm.
I imagine there is going to be more stress on the spine. But what's important is that you're trying to get the majority of that movement from your hips, from your pelvis. And there's a difference between hip rotation and lumbar spine rotation. And then there's a difference. So the lumbar spine is the lower part of your back. Then there's a difference between lumbar spine rotation and thoracic rotation, which is your torso, what most people would call shoulder turn
Mm-hmm.
in kind of golf language. And what's interesting is that there's a theory. I'm pretty certain it was Gray Cook popularized it, who's the guy behind the FMS, and it's called the joint by joint approach. And Mike Boyle talks about this a lot as well, who's a really well known strength and conditioning coach who's been around for a long time. They talk about the body being divided into segments where you have a mobile joint and then a stable joint and then another mobile joint or segment of the body. And what's really important for golfers is we want the ankle, the hip, and the thoracic spine to be mobile segments. The reason being is that the way they're designed, they're very, very good at rotating. They can move quite a lot. We want the knee and the lumbar spine, which are no good at rotating, we want them to be quite stable. But what happens if we pick the hip, the lumbar spine, and the thoracic spine? If the hip and the thoracic spine can't rotate particularly well, then we may go searching for rotation or move in a compensatory pattern from the lumbar spine, which it's not well suited to. And I think that's more of a problem than getting a lot of rotation from the hips.
Yeah, I think that's going back years is looking at my own issues. That's where a lot of mine, the multiplier came from.
Yeah, so it's definitely worth looking at. Like anybody, there's lots of reasons why people might have back issues from playing golf, and you might have perfect mechanic, well, or whatever perfect mechanics might be considered. You might have really good mechanics. You might have really good mobility, really good strength, be in great shape. There's no way of getting away from swinging a golf club for, say, hundreds or thousands of times a week Like there's going to be stress on your back.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? It's not just a case of how you're swinging the golf club. It's also a case of the volume, the loading,
Yeah, the
and
body's not
tolerance.
designed to take that amount of repetitive abuse.
Yeah, and what's interesting, like so the repetitive stuff is definitely one thing. You can try and do your best with kind of conditioning to help your body strengthen and get better at supporting the stress. Where people need to be really careful is I kind of gone slightly off, but what people need to be really careful with is sudden increases in the amount they're doing. Like a perfect example is I had a client a couple of months ago and I've been training him for a long time and it's really rare. Like if a client's going to struggle with something, I can usually kind of guess what it's going to be because I've trained them for a while. It's like, okay, well, if something flares up, it's probably going to be this. So this particular client came in, or I think he might have emailed me to cancel a workout, and I was talking to him the next time and was asking what was wrong, and he said, my back just seized up. It's been killing me. And I was kind of thinking, I was like, those things usually don't happen out of nowhere, especially when there's no like history of lumbar spine
Mm-hmm.
issue or whatever. So I was asking him and I said, like, has anything changed? Like, did you do anything differently in the last like week or couple of weeks or the last few days? Like that could be a factor. And he was going through and he was like, I don't think so. He was like, we didn't do anything different in our workout. I've been playing golf normally. And then he said, actually, I got a lesson a couple of days ago. And in the lesson, the instructor was trying to get me to move my hips differently in the downswing. Basically, I think it was try and get more rotation and less slide. That's not the important part. What's important is that he spent a couple of hours that day during and after the lesson and the
Mm-hmm.
next day, like really grooving in say like kind of slow motion drills before he hit balls and then hitting balls, this really, really new movement. So if you think of where his baseline tolerance is for, say, stress to that part of his body, which is from his background, like his training, his regular everyday life stuff, how much he plays golf, that's what he's used to. But then all of a sudden he multiplied that, say, like 10 times over by going, the same motion. Oh, so if you imagine like it was almost like say a top of the backswing and then practicing that hips first move, hips first move, hip first move. He was essentially doing that for like a few hours over the space of a few days. Joe, his back seized up and he was like, what's wrong? And I was like, there's nothing wrong. Like it's just, your body's freaking out. It's like if somebody, is used to running, say, I don't know, 15 miles a week. And then one day they run 25.
Mm-hmm.
And the next day they wake up and it feels like their Achilles tendons have snapped, their quads have been, walking up and down a mountain. Like that's what's really important is a kind of a gradual increase in practice or play or workout volume.
Yeah, I think if you look at, or at least in my experience with the students I've had, if you have students that are in their 20s, when you're working with some elite players, and you have to teach them that how to push themselves beyond what they think is that they can do, right? Maybe you see this in yours as well. And then when they get into their 30s, they're learning how to push that envelope, or they've adapted to it. But someone like myself, once you're in your 40s or late 40s, you got to learn how to not push because
Yeah,
you
maybe
push
so.
for so long, your body's like, no, I'm not pushing that hard anymore.
Yeah, and the other thing, like not saying it's your specific case, but something that people need to remember too is like there's a difference between somebody who's in really, really good condition, pushing themselves really hard,
Mm-hmm.
and somebody who's fallen out of really good condition, pushing themselves the same way they learned how to do years before when they were doing the training and say the conditioning elements behind it that support that. If you
Yeah,
know
I
what I
think
mean?
yeah, I think Charles Poliquin, one of his articles I read many years ago, talked about your training level. So you're a beginner. I think he classified a beginner as someone who's been training for 1 to 3 years. So I mean, even if you're in a gym consistently for 3 years, you're still at a beginner level. Now he's working with world
Yeah,
champions and Olympic athletes, but I could see that very easy. But if you're because if you're training somebody to be at that level, the last thing you want them to do is get hurt. because now they're
Hmm.
off for 6 weeks, 6 months, what have you, and you're almost starting over again.
Yeah.
What do you do? Do you see your prescribing is, or what would you consider one of the best exercises for golfers, if there is one, or if there's more of a common denominator that you see?
Yeah, like it's very hard to give one. Like I don't want to fob off the answer, but I'll give a little bit of kind of scope first. Is that it's very hard to give one answer.
Mm-hmm.
The reason being is that what might be a really good exercise for someone, I won't say it's a bad exercise for someone else, but they just may not need it. And a perfect example of that would be if you have so two really good exercises and two things that are really important for golfers, okay? One is say any type of like vertical jump or squat jump. Okay. I really like for golfers. Teaches you how to push force into the ground, trains the fast twitch muscle fibers, all like keeps those there as you start to get a little bit older. Really good for power production. We know that there's a strong relationship between vertical jump and club head speed, and we know there's a strong relationship between vertical force in the swing and club head speed. Okay. And then another one is, say, hip rotation, the ability to turn your pelvis, or think of that separation drill.
Mm-hmm.
If I have a, say, basketball player, someone who played basketball in their background come to me, they have a really good vertical jump, but their internal hip rotation is terrible. Then I have somebody come to me who has been practicing yoga for the last 5 years. Their internal hip rotation is excellent, but their power production in the jump is terrible. Well, then the same exercise, if I prescribe both of those people vertical jumps, it's going to be really useful for the person who's been practicing yoga. And it's probably not going to do a whole lot for the basketball player who already has an awesome vertical jump. If I prescribe both of them hip rotation or hip mobility drills, it's going to be useless for the person who's been doing yoga, but it could be a complete game changer for the basketball player who already has an awesome vertical jump but has no hip rotation. But what I see all the time is that most people don't lie on the extreme sides of the spectrum like those two people do. Most people are squashed in way closer together because most people are sitting at desks, they're not doing a whole lot, they don't have extensive backgrounds in something that's just yoga or that's just jumping. And most people that I see need the same stuff. They might need it in slightly different doses, but I can't remember the last time I like, particularly with males, females tend to get away with more on the mobility side of things
Right.
because they're naturally more mobile and their joints have a bit more slack. Like I can't really remember the last time that I've worked with, say, a male golfer between the age of 25 and 80 that wouldn't benefit from uh, training or practicing mobility at their hips, spine, shoulders, that wouldn't benefit from practicing jumping and throwing med balls for rotary power, that wouldn't benefit from some lower body, trunk, and upper body strength. And that will help their physical capacity for their golf swing. Now, some of them might need a little bit more mobility than others, and some of them might need a little bit more strength than others. But it's unbelievably rare that I'm going to say to somebody, especially unless they had some real high level training in something else, that I'm going to say, your power is as high as we need it to be. Forget training it. We're just going working on mobility, or vice versa. Like most people fall into kind of the center of the bell curve and they need a little bit of everything. They need some mobility, they need some speed and power, they need some strength, and they usually need it in most parts of the body. And then with females, a lot of the time their mobility doesn't need to be worked on as much. You might do a little bit to maintain it, but nearly all the time their strength and power, without generalizing, is usually where they're going to make biggest improvements from.
Yeah, I had a very good friend that he had a putter company, and he was a power lifter, a world long drive guy, and very diversified martial artist. And he was out on the ladies tour for about a year and a half. And when he came back, I said, biggest thing you've seen different? And he said, it's the short game. And I said, well, why is it? And he said, well, the women not obviously are more mobile and flexible, but they don't have the hand and forearm strength. So when they're trying to hold onto a wedge, they're holding onto it harder. So if it's a scale of 1 to 10, they're holding on it, let's say a 7. Where the men are holding on, let's say, an average tour guy, he said, would be a 3 to 4. He said, so
Okay.
if you're holding harder, your touch and feel actually goes down. If you're holding it lighter, your touch and feel goes up, your ability to respond. And I found that very interesting, kind of to the point you're making, where the differences in the genders.
Well, there's so like I couldn't comment on the sort of the wedge play, but what is true, the differences between males and females is that if you standardize for weight, for body weight,
Mm-hmm.
females in general will tend to be way closer to males in strength and power levels for the lower body, but not the gap will hugely widen in the upper body.
So
And
the
that
amount of
would
muscle mass that's available for
no
recruitment.
so the muscle mass and also strength. So if you say did a either did a power or a strength test, the females would tend to be way closer to the males in the lower body tests than in the upper body tests. There'll be a bigger drop off in the difference of power in males and females of the same body weight in upper body versus lower body power.
It's very interesting.
So that's obviously going to have implications then for something like the golf swing, which is using, a total body
Right.
move or a total body expression of power. And that's actually, it's slightly off point. One thing that drives me crazy, I see where they're coming from, but you need to be careful, is all the time I see people saying amateur golfers, your regular club player, can learn way more from watching the LPGA Tour players swing than the PGA Tour players swing. And where they say that because the club head speeds are close. It's about a 95 mile per hour average on the ladies tour, and a lot of average club players would fall into the kind of 90 to high 90s category. How they're developing that speed is completely different though. Like, if you know what I mean, if you think of the 50-year-old, I don't know, whatever handicap, it doesn't matter, like a reasonably good player, even say like I don't know, a single figure, like an 8 to 12 handicap or something like that, male 50-year-old versus a 24-year-old LPGA Tour player, and they both swing the driver 98 miles per hour.
Mm-hmm.
Like, the profiles they're doing it with are way, way different. Now, there is a lot to be said for you can learn from how they get around the course at such a high level because you're hitting the ball like close to the same distance. That's one thing, like watching how they plot around the course. But in terms of the speed production, the profiles are obviously completely different.
Yeah, it's night and day. If someone were to look at the numbers,
Of course, yeah.
yeah. What's a typical day look like for you?
A typical day for me is I like getting up early. I way prefer doing stuff in the morning. So it's funny if it's a if so I do primarily gym workouts, or I do a kind of on grass running session,
Mm-hmm.
especially when I'm in Gaelic football season. If it is a gym day, which tends to be Mondays and Wednesdays, I usually get up, have like some coffee or whatever, do some emails, blah, blah, blah. But I'll usually wait until the gym quietens down to go and work out. So I might go there at about 9 a.m. I'd come back, have some breakfast, do like emails or whatever work I'm doing for my online stuff, for the Fit for Golf stuff. And then most days at about 4 p.m. or 3 p.m., I'm in Hanson Fitness for Golf for my in-person clients. And I'm generally there until 8 p.m. And then I usually get back, have something to eat, chill out for an hour in front of the TV, and go to sleep is generally it. And then if it's a Tuesday or Thursday when I'm doing my running sessions, I usually do that first thing in the morning at about 6:30 or so. And then kind of same thing, some food, some online work. Usually get out in the middle of the day too, get some sunshine, get a walk in or something like that. And then most evenings in the gym from about 3 or 4 to about 8 p.m.
One thing Andrew and I talked about, that general public has somewhat of a misconception on is if you're a high level trainer or you're a golf instructor, that the general public thinks that you're working with PGA or LPGA tour pros or elite amateurs all the time. But that they don't understand that, let's say 90% of your time or more is probably spent working with general public, is it not?
Yeah, definitely. And like that's something interesting is that the vast majority of the people that I'm working with are normal people that you meet on the golf course every weekend. I always tell parents it's basically like it's like training one of your parents, it's
Mm-hmm.
just average person. Um that has it has and that segues actually into an interesting almost not division, but that's important for the type of training you're prescribing to people. So, for example, the clients that I'm working with most of the time, golf is a part of their life, but them improving at their golf doesn't really change, say, like their income or whatever. It's not
Right.
their main thing. So, general health is a huge thing, though. So, the programs you're prescribing for them, you're not looking at eking the last couple of performance improvements in their golf game or their club head speed, or a lot of it is you're thinking about their overall health. So that would change. Like the people I'm working with pretty much every day, whether it's online or in the gym, it's not the same thing as if Justin Thomas walked into my gym tomorrow or Ricky Fowler walked in tomorrow and he said, I swing the driver 116 miles per hour. All I care about is getting it to 120. Like that process of training is going to be a little bit different to the 63-year-old who comes in and he's, 25 pounds overweight. He has a left knee that's been giving him trouble. He can only train twice a week for an hour. Like those programs are going to be a little bit different. And when his goal is, he's like, yeah, if I get like I'd like to get better at golf, but the main thing is I want to keep being able to play it when I'm 85. I'd like if my left knee hurt less, and like all I'm kind of interested in is hitting it past my buddy who I've started hitting it behind.
Competition
Those
never ends, does it?
yeah, like those, and that's a common thing. Like those training programs and plans are different. Like there is a difference between real elite high level performance as opposed to the general population that's trying to get better at golf. But an important differentiation there too is that the type of training program that you might give someone who, like if you just use like say the Justin Thomas or Ricky Fowler example that just popped into my head first, the general population person may not even get more improvement than they would from a real basic program than they would from following the one that you might be prescribing Justin Thomas or Ricky Fowler, because they're just at a level where it's so easy to make improvements. There's no need to go ultra specific and really dive into the finer details. It's like you're going to start improving at a pretty fast rate from doing real simple basic stuff. But if you're dealing with someone who, like those two, I imagine, have been doing, they've been in tune with their physical training and their, mechanics, that's probably going to require a lot more thought and sort of minute variations to really try and eke out the last little bit of improvement. Does that make
Yeah,
sense?
absolutely. Makes total sense. I think that might even help the listeners in that if they're, let's say, at 18 handicap and they want to get down to a single digit,
Yeah,
if they think they're going to come in and you're going to give them the same training program that Tiger or Justin Thomas or Rick or somebody else on the tour has, it should be eye opening to them. It's like, no, that's not what you need. We're not going to train on
exactly.
specific for this because you need the general foundation first.
Exactly. But something that often happens, and like after a while, you just learn to kind of fob it off and not really say anything. It's just, okay, we're going to start warming up anyway. Like someone comes in, you've been training for a while, and they're like, oh, I saw so and so, insert the name of professional athlete, doing this exercise on Instagram yesterday. What do you think? And you're like, yeah, like it's cool, whatever. Like, like, do you want to do it? Like, is that what you're getting at? Like, but it's almost as if they think that like that's the secret. Like, that's what's unlocking their 10 miles per hour of club head speed, or like that's what's going to give them the six pack. You're like, it usually like there's the methods that you use are small factors. Like you need to be following the principles that that person needs. But most people, and that's why sometimes I find it interesting, like when people talk about customized programs or individualized programs, like that can be important, especially if the person has an injury history. But like if I'm training people, I have a pretty good idea of a template that I'm going to use, especially if it's a golfer. There's a certain amount of things that I want that those people to be good at, and you're almost just scaling the exercise or the movement to their level as opposed to using way different exercises. And that's why I think a lot of people get obsessed with, but like this is a customized, individualized workout to me. It's like you probably need similar stuff to everybody else or nearly everybody else in your demographic. Don't worry about it being ultra customized, ultra specific, because really like what individualization is doing, it's not so much you're making something for, especially unless it's the real high end level of performance. It's not like you're really making it for that one person. It's more like you're in this group, you're in this big pot. Like that's what you need. And then somebody else might be in another pot, but you don't have a pot for every single person on the planet. We're different, but we're not that different.
Right.
Like you're still going to need the same stuff. Now it needs to be scaled to your ability level, but it's not like one person needs completely different things to the others because most people fall in the middle of that bell curve. I'm not saying that people don't need different training programs where everybody should be doing the exact same thing, but a simpler way of what I kind of went off on there is that there's way more similarities in terms of what people need compared to huge differences.
Would that be something similar to if you have, let's say, someone who's 62 years old comes in and you need to strengthen their glutes, but they don't have the flexibility or strength to do a deadlift, so maybe you start them out with hip thrust, and then conversely you have their granddaughter or grandson comes in, they're 20 years old, they have flexibility, and you can start them off with, let's say, a bar only deadlift.
Yeah.
So it's the same, working similar things and patterns, but it's customized, so to speak, for each.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly. And what's even more like likely than that is if we stick to say the kind of hip thrust or deadlift movement, just for a reference point, is that I did deadlifts with my mom yesterday. You know what I mean? But we had different bars set up. You know what I
Right.
you know like or you could have somebody who's just this happens all the time in practical sessions, and usually when I post out videos, I might show the same exercise but with three different implements. So like you might have somebody doing a deadlift with say a bar, which is say harder, but if the person's at a high strength level, it just gets too hard to load kettlebells and dumbbells.
Mm-hmm.
But you might have somebody 5 yards away from them and you're teaching them how to deadlift with a 15 or 20 pound kettlebell. So it's the same movement, but you're scaling it to the individual. Or another example is like, say, if you think of like a split squat or a lunge, somebody might be doing a split squat with a barbell across their back and whatever, 185 pounds. I've given people also split squats where they have their hand up against a wall for balance, or they're holding, two golf clubs pressed into the ground, grip side down, to help with their stability next to the person who's doing split squats with, a ton of weight. That's what's more important than that person doesn't need split squats or deadlifts and the other person does. That doesn't happen as often. It's more, this is the level that you're starting at. Gradually, we'll progress you to wherever we think you need to go.
Mm-hmm.
That's what's more common.
Yeah, right. I agree. So we're getting into weights and training. That's a good segue into the next topic, so to speak. And in today's game, there is such a focus on distance, right? That's the talking point for everything. Now, equipment has a lot to do with it. Ball and driver, the technology behind the steel and balls going forever. Launch monitors, you name it. Irons, they're going longer. Now, I combat that with if it's the loft and the length of a 7-iron, that doesn't make it an 8-iron. Right? So people need to remember that. But you and I had a great talk, was about a couple of weeks ago, I wish we would have recorded, about training for more distance, and included a lot of strength training and speed training. So let's go back to that if we can. on let's start with some of the misconceptions that people have on training for distance, be it speed and strength.
Um, I think probably the biggest one is when people think about strength training, the first thing that they're worried about is, I would say that I hear most often is, I don't want to get either too big and bulky, and I don't want to lose my flexibility or mobility.
Mm-hmm.
And the kind of answer to that is that, so first of all, yes, increasing muscle size helps you produce force at all speeds. So if you're trying to get faster, increasing muscle size will help up to a point, especially in sports where you don't have to move your mass. Like swinging a golf club is different to sprinting or jumping. Building muscle mass is a relatively slow process. So if you feel like that you're gaining too much muscle mass, it's not going to happen over a course of weeks or months. Like gaining pounds of muscle mass takes years. So if you do see it going in that direction, like there's plenty of time to rein it back in. It's not something that most people need to worry about at all. In fact, most people should be striving to gain muscle mass because it's so hard and so beneficial. Then the other one in terms of losing flexibility is that's just not true. Like there's quite a lot of research that shows strength training, so weight training or resistance training, especially when done through a full range of motion,
Yeah,
is
I was going to say the full range,
which is actually very, very beneficial for improving mobility. So a way of thinking about it is, it's not quite the same, but if you can do a stretch versus doing nearly close to the same stretch, but with some weight, why is that going to decrease your mobility or flexibility?
Yeah, because a lot of the decrease in flexibility comes from a contraction of the fascia or the muscle capsule, doesn't it?
Well, I'm not certain on that, but what I would say is that where most people get wrong is when they start weight training, they get sore.
Mm-hmm.
And the next day, because they're sore, and when they go to do something, they feel the soreness, they correlate that or associate it with a decrease in flexibility. But that's a very short-term acute change as opposed to a long-term change. Like if you do a heavy training session or a new training session, the next day you try and swing a club and you're like, man, I can barely move. That's not because your flexibility has decreased or you've gained a ton of muscle mass. You're just sore. You know what I mean? And in 2 or 3 days' time, your mobility may actually be improved.
Yeah, so there's misconception. One is that strength training will not reduce your flexibility. In fact, it will more than likely increase if you're doing it through a full range.
Exactly, definitely. The other one, which is really important then, is that like soreness, which I kind of touched on there, that's not a good indicator of how beneficial or how productive a workout was. So the way that you get sore, there's two main ways that soreness happens. Number one is you either do a new activity. So even if you're someone who's, say, in good shape and you're regularly training and you put in a new exercise tomorrow, you're probably going to be sore from that new exercise because it's a slightly different stress. A way that golfers can probably think about that is like if you've played golf for a long time, an instructor gives you a new move in your swing and you're practicing it, you feel a big stretch in another part of your body, or you might find like, man, my like left glute or the right side of my, like back is getting tight and stiff from doing that. It's something new. The other one then is doing way more of something than you're used to. But then the second one is soreness tends to happen from exercises where you're bringing weight and you're bringing the muscle into a very stretched position. That's primarily where the soreness comes from, but that's not an indicator of your progress. Like you'll be able to tell your progress by improvements essentially in the metrics you're using to measure it, whether that's an increase in weight or an increase in club head speed or an increase in jump height or throwing distance.
The jump height thing is kind of funny because as Phil Mickelson has been noted that his swing speed has increased. But if anyone remembers when he won the Masters, his vertical jump looked like it was about 4 inches.
Yeah, well, so vertical jump, what's important to remember with vertical jump is that it's not so much how high you can jump, it's what jump height tells you in regards to force.
Mm-hmm.
So you need to remember that your body weight is going to be affecting your jump height. So for example, what I'm trying to say is somebody who's heavy, they might not have a very good vertical jump, but they're pushing a whole lot of force into the ground. Like if you're 250 pounds and you jump 14 inches, that's a whole lot different to somebody weighing 150 pounds jumping 14 inches.
Right.
The power production is completely different. So when they're swinging a golf club, the amount of force that's going into the ground is going to be likely different, and there's going to be a different club head speed.
Let's talk about the difference in speed training versus, let's say, heavyweight training, because we
Yeah.
talked a lot about the speed sticks and we both agreed that they work. The one thing I said was you can get the club, your arms and thus the club to go faster, but does that individual's body have the capacity to keep up? So while you might be swinging it faster, and this is where I think it's just an opinion, where I think Mickelson might be getting off, is he's moving his arms and the club head faster, but his body's not keeping up with it. So his direction has gone off.
Yeah, like that's probably more like kind of say going out of my realm of what would be considered expertise in terms of, syncing up and kind of accuracy. But that was going to be the next point that I went to in terms of misconceptions is like, and that it goes back to what I was saying as well about what works and what doesn't work and what is closer to optimal, is that like obviously a golf club is a light implement.
Mm-hmm.
Why? And you're swinging it very fast. Why should I lift heavy weights? Or how can heavy weights be beneficial? And like I could go on about this for a whole other podcast. There's literally books written on it. But like the main things are like is that with strength training in particular, and by heavier strength training, for the purpose of this, let's pick a weight that you can only move for. I would say for say advanced trainees, you can only move it 5 times in a set.
Mm-hmm.
For beginners, you could probably extend that out to 10 because they'll still get benefits at that. But what's happening is strength training is really, really good for increasing muscle size. Increasing muscle size is a really, really good way of improving your ability to produce force at all velocities. Okay. Also, lifting heavy weights allows us to produce a whole lot of force, and it essentially improves our ceiling for force production. But what happens in something like a golf swing is that it happens so quickly, we don't get a chance to apply all of the force we're capable of producing. What becomes very important then is how quickly we can apply force. And that's where speed training becomes really, really useful. So in simple terms, you can use strength training to improve the size of your muscle fibers, which is really important. It's also very, very useful for learning how to recruit your biggest, most powerful fibers, your type 2 or fast twitch muscle fibers. And then we use speed training to teach us how to apply that force more quickly. An issue, so if we think of people who are not particularly strong and their ceiling for force production is low, and when they're swinging a golf club, they still don't have a chance to apply all of that speed because the movement is happening too fast. They're only applying a small bit of force because, let me think of saying this a bit more clearly now, sorry.
Well, is it because the nervous system won't allow the body to move faster because it doesn't have the musculature and the strength to hold positions and is worried about getting hurt?
No, so what I should have explained is that their force production capability is low.
Mm-hmm.
During a fast movement, because they can only apply a certain amount of their low ceiling, they're not going to be producing a very high level of force. If you have somebody who has a higher force potential ceiling and they're recruiting their percentage, it's going to be higher. So if you imagine someone who's very high strength level versus very low strength level, just say, for example, when you're swinging a golf club, you only get to tap into 30% of your maximum force. The person with the higher strength ceiling is going to be tapping into a higher force than the person with the low strength ceiling tapping into 30% of their potential force. About that, yeah, made that a little bit confusing. A way that I like to to use an analogy, is that almost like a car that has a high or a fast 0 to 60 speed,
Mm-hmm.
those cars are never ones that have a top speed of 100 miles per hour. Their top speed is, 200 or 250 or whatever. And they're the cars that can get up to 0 to 60 very fast. What I will say though is that a big problem in training for golfers in terms of speed training and strength training, most people lie on complete opposite ends of the spectrum or the continuum. You've some people who are like, just get stronger, just get stronger. You've some people who say, it's not about lifting heavy weights, it's about swinging speed sticks, or it's about doing things really quickly. But it goes back into both of them are beneficial. They're beneficial for different reasons, but using them together will almost certainly be more beneficial than disregarding one and just using the other.
Yeah, and you and
They
I
can
talked about that.
they support each other basically.
Where I've had debates with other instructors where they're like, no, you got to, if you want to swing faster, you have to practice swinging fast. And I said, okay, that's true. I don't argue that. I said, but you also have to fire your nervous system as fast as possible. And if you're moving a 300-pound bench press hardly moving at all, your neural pathways are firing as absolutely fast almost as they can for that time.
Exactly. That's a good point. But what's the other side of that is, even though they're trying to move as fast as they can, the movement velocity is quite slow. So the adaptations that happen at the nervous system and in the muscles are going to be different to the adaptations we'd get if you were doing, say, a plyometric push-up or a seated medicine ball chest pass, which is a similar movement pattern, but at a way higher velocity. That doesn't mean that the 300-pound bench press is useless, though, because the things that you're doing there by improving how much force you can produce in that movement will likely make you able to produce way more power when you're then doing your medicine ball chest pass or your plyometric push-up. The training supports each other. The thing that is important to note for strength training, and something that I've kind of come around to recently that I've changed in the last couple of years, is that, and it's why strength training is prescribed so regularly, particularly for beginner trainees, is that you get huge benefit. If we just take club head speed as what we're kind of using for improvement, you can get huge benefits in club head speed from getting stronger, especially early on in your training. Like early on in your training, in your strength training, if you're lifting heavy weights, is when you will see the biggest improvement and transfer to club head speed. As you get more advanced, though, if you think of your kind of classic exercises, like say your squat and bench press, as you start to get stronger in those, gradually the transfer to club head speed will drop off, because those exercises they're not super specific, and you've almost like milked the gains that you can from them.
Mm-hmm.
So what's a good example there is, like, if you have someone who, say, has a 350-pound deadlift, they're trying to increase their club head speed, and they think the answer is learning how to deadlift 450 pounds. That's probably not going to make a huge difference. But if you have somebody who has never strength trained, and then they strength train for 3 or 6 months, they're going to see huge increases in their strength, and they're probably going to see very, very healthy increases in their club head speed. What needs to happen with the person who's been strength training for a while and their improvements in strength are starting to drop off, and as they get stronger in what we consider strength in the kind of classic sense, lifting heavy weights, when their club head speed's not really responding to that anymore, that's when the stuff that's slightly more specific in terms of movement pattern and the velocity you're moving at becomes way, way more valuable, like the speed sticks, like the jumping, like the throwing. Whereas the person who is a beginner, they'll make huge benefits from the general training. Not that they shouldn't be doing this specific stuff on top of it, but they're just going to have way more transfer compared to the more advanced person.
Yeah, so it is a blend. It's a balance. I guess what we discuss and what you're saying now, so the people listening at home can. So you have, if they're starting out, you want a little more strength training.
not even that I want more strength training. It's just that they'll get way more benefit from it.
Hmm.
Like people like it's a case of if a certain amount of something is good, more doesn't often mean better.
Yeah, law of diminishing returns. You can only
Law of
go so
diminishing
far.
returns is really important. And then you need to start looking into way more specific things. Like, and that's why it's a way easier to take someone from, say, uh, 95 mile per hour club head speed to a 105 mile per hour club head speed than it is to take someone from a 115 mile per hour club head speed to 125,
Hmm.
because you're just coming closer to what the person is capable of, basically, you know. But a good way for listeners to probably think about it would be that the heavier type strength training is very, very useful for improving muscle size, which has an effect on the force you can produce at all speeds. And it also improves your force production capability, the total amount of force you have available. Then your speed training allows you tap into how quickly you can produce that force. That is important because if we take a heavy strength training exercise, say if we've decided, this will be a good example to give the listeners, right? We've talked already about how a squat type movement, training it is useful for club head speed.
Right.
Okay. If we take the squat movement pattern and we imagine somebody squatting, let's just say they're doing a set of three squats with as heavy a weight as they can. Okay. It takes the person, the amount of time it takes the person to develop maximum force when they're doing that squat. Okay. The way, like, even though you're trying to move quickly, like you said about the bench press, the bar is moving quite slowly. The amount of time it takes to hit your peak force in a movement like that is much longer than the amount of time we have to produce force in a golf swing.
Hmm.
Okay. So you can't get to that peak force. So if we use the heavy squat, the amount of peak force you're hitting, you can't get to peak force in the swing, the same amount of force. If we take something that's the same movement pattern, but we change it to very, very light and very high velocity, or at least a much higher velocity, like a vertical jump, that's going to be closer to what we're doing in the golf swing.
So it's like a
So what we
dynamic
want to,
exercise.
exactly, yeah, a lighter, really fast one. What we want to have is when we're swinging the golf club, it's ideal for us to have trained in a fashion where our total force production capability is very, very high. But then we've also learned how to apply that force much more quickly with things like jumping. So that when we're swinging and we only have a short amount of time to produce force, we have a very, very high ceiling for total force production, but we've also trained to apply that very quickly. That's going to be better than somebody who's only trained for speed and never increased their force ceiling. And it's going to be much better than somebody who's only trained for strength and has never learned how to apply it faster. And that's why going from a 300-pound squat to a 400-pound squat may not do anything for increasing your club head speed, because the amount of time that you're producing the force in the squat is just too long. You don't have that much time in the golf swing.
Yeah, there was a quarter, 0.2 seconds or 0.25 seconds.
Yeah, in the downswing you have
Right.
about 0.25 seconds, okay, to make your downswing. To produce maximum force in a very, very heavy strength exercise can take about zero point 0.5 or zero point 0.6 seconds. So you don't have that amount of time in your downswing to recruit all that much force. But it's way better to have, if we take, say, a 400-pound or a 300-pound squat as your maximum force production, and you've got 0.25 seconds to apply as much of that force as possible, that's way better than having 0.25 seconds to apply as much as a 100-pound squat as possible,
Hmm.
because you're going to be dealing with way higher forces at the end of the day. That's what I tried to explain about 10 minutes ago that I didn't do very clearly. I kind of lost the train of thought a little bit. But that's why you want to have both ends of those spectrum trained pretty well. What I think some people get lost with is, because strength training helped them an awful lot. And this kind of happened to me in sports, and it's definitely like you see it happening all the time. what happens, people, is because they find strength training is so beneficial in, say, their first maybe definitely 1 and maybe 2 to 3 years of when they start, that they think that keep getting stronger will keep tipping into their club head speed, which I don't really think is true. I think the more advanced you get, the less benefits you get from strength, and the more benefits you get from things that are closer in both speed, so the time constraint, like a jump, and also the movement pattern.
Oh, I agree. I when I was playing, the last year I played was 2006, so I was doing a lot of 15 rep sets, and the guy that was helping me with training and would help with my swing, he was an amateur bodybuilder at one time, and he said, get off the light weights, start doing some heavy stuff, 5 to 7 reps.
Mm-hmm.
And I did. And I was pretty long for when I was playing in the, let's say, the top 3% of the guys that were playing then. But within a couple, I would say probably 4 to 6 weeks and thereafter, my distance just jumped dramatically. I'm talking about 8-iron. Now you got to remember the equipment was a little different then. 8-iron, stock 8-iron going anywhere from 176 to 178 at sea level. I mean, it was air carrier driver at 295, 300 was, there was no second thoughts.
And what's important there, and again, it goes back to where somebody is coming from, is that because you hadn't been doing that type of training, you probably had a gap where you were lacking in that type of strength. Like, first of all, doing something for about 15 reps is getting way more into kind of muscular endurance than the real short duration explosive power output. But it goes back to, like, if you give me somebody who is a power lifter and they want to increase their club head speed, it's unlikely that getting them stronger is what's going to unlock their club head speed.
Right.
You know what I mean? They're probably going to need to learn how to apply that force a little bit more quickly by learning how to swing things fast. If you give me a 22-year-old college player who's been swinging golf clubs since they were 3 years old, but they've never touched a weight, and they want to improve their club head speed, I can guarantee you if you put them on a powerlifting program, they will increase their club head speed. Not that a powerlifting program is the perfect thing for them to do, but they're so lacking in that department that will help.
Yeah, and of course, like any golfer, I say, oh, geez, I'm going to keep doing this. And by the end of that year, I mean, I gotten probably too big, and that strength deficiency was filled. But I wasn't, and I kept pushing and pushing for more distance, and I wasn't getting.
And that's the law of diminishing marginal returns we talk about.
Mm-hmm.
What I think another thing, and it was actually that conversation we had, is actually sparked me to think about it a little bit more. And this is probably what's even more important for a lot of the listeners when they're talking about, like, strength versus speed. Should I be lifting heavy weights? Should I be doing fast type stuff? Like, the answer is both for nearly everybody. But if we think, right, rather than just saying, I want to increase my club head speed, what sort of training should I be doing? What your listeners can probably reflect on a little bit better is, if they, like, when you lose club head speed. So if anybody listening is at a stage where they're not as long as they used to be, because say they've gotten a little bit older or whatever, what I almost like to do is look at it backwards and think of what's changed physically from when you swung the club as fast as possible, and why does club head speed drop as we age? Well, do you lose mobility? Yes. Do you lose muscle mass? Yes. Do you lose maximum strength in terms of how much weight you could lift? Yes. Do you lose speed or power in terms of how high you could jump, or how fast you could sprint, or how far you could throw something? Yes. Should I put all these things in a training program? Probably.
Yeah.
Like, it's not like, why would you pick one of those? And that's why, if you look at it that way, in terms of, okay, what happens when club head speed starts to drop off? Mobility down. Yep. Muscle mass down. Yeah, definitely. Maximum strength down. 100%. Explosive speed down. Yeah, definitely. If they're the things that drop off as club head speed is lost, does it not make sense to have all those things in the program if we're trying to increase club head speed?
Why would you want to do something that makes so much sense? Let me ask you.
That's the way that I try to explain to
Let
people.
me ask you, because as I was on that kick on heavy training, I kept looking for more and better ways to improve strength, and the one I found out that strength took
Can I
another.
actually stop you for 1 second,
Yeah,
Pete?
sure.
Something just hit me there, right? So the other thing that's important on this is that strength is like when we talk about strength, there always needs to be a context put on it. Strength is quite specific. So when we get off of it a little bit then, but there's always going to be a difference between strength at high velocities, like most sporting actions,
Mm-hmm.
and strength at low velocities. They all cross over and transfer with each other, but only to certain points. So like when somebody says he's really strong or he's not so strong, like the next question almost needs to be like, but how are you measuring it? Like at what? What is he really strong at? And that will give us better answers then in terms of how likely it is to affect the sporting action, in our case, the golf swing that you're trying to improve. Like that's just something too important to remember because you might say, he's really strong. Well, how do you know he's really strong? Well, he can do, say, bicep curls with 40 pounds weight. It's like, okay, but are his legs strong? Well, no. Well, then is he really strong?
Right.
And you can look at that in a lot of different ways. And it's like, oh, that guy's in great shape. Why? He can squat 400 pounds. Okay, but like, can he move quickly at all? Like there's different ways of looking at it.
Yeah, and that I tell people that continually evolves. So long as your evolution, so to speak, of your game and your training and your swing and everything, it obviously has its ups and downs as you work new muscles and they get sore. But so long as that you're working on that upward inclination, then everything continues to improve, even as you might age, right? So your age might
Yeah,
be going one way, but your
exactly.
improvement's going the other if you do it correctly.
Yeah, and actually that's another good reason is that trying to get each of those capacities at kind of as high a level as you can reasonably so that when the eventual decline starts to happen, you're working at a way higher base from where to stop
Mm-hmm.
that drop off, basically. But I think that like that what we did there a couple of minutes ago in terms of what decline, like what drops off as club head speed declines if you go through those capacities, should those be in the program if we're trying to increase club head speed or keep it? I think they should all be there.
Yeah, I agree. And well, that kind of leads into what I want to ask you is eccentric versus concentric training. So as I was looking to
Okay.
improve strength, I got into eccentric training. For maybe some out there that don't know, eccentric would be the lowering portion of, say, a bench press, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, and what I had put together was you're about 20 that you can do 20 to 30% more weight on the eccentric portion than you can on the concentric. So
Yeah.
if you can bench press 200 pounds, your eccentric motion, which would be the lowering of it, you could handle up to 260 pounds. But then you would have to have someone help you lift it up because obviously you can't do so.
Yeah.
Do you see? Do you work with that at all, or have you seen that as you work with?
I've actually started experimenting with it a little bit myself. The thing I would say with that, like that is so far more advanced than 99% of people playing golf in the world need to consider for their training,
Mm-hmm.
is that it's probably not something you need to worry about. The other thing with that is from a practical standpoint, it can be reasonably hard to set up in terms of like, if you're doing something like a bench press, you need a spotter.
Right.
It's definitely easier to set up doing, say, like an easier way of doing it is say using two limbs on the way up and one limb on the way down. So
Yep.
an example would be like a standing dumbbell press. You use both hands on the dumbbell and a little bit of help from your legs to push it overhead, and then you control it on the way down. The other thing with that is to use something that's that stressful, you need to have a pretty decent training age. Like I would not be comfortable with the vast majority of people that I train saying, "Hey, today we're doing eccentric overloads. Let's go."
Right.
Because most of them are just not at a level. But for high level athletes, I think there's huge scope in it, and it's something that's underutilized because nearly all the time the loads that we use in exercises are dictated by how much we can move concentrically, which is the way back up from the exercise, basically.
Mm-hmm.
And we very rarely max out how strong that we can get eccentrically or isometrically.
Oh, I
And
will
more,
warn people, anyone that's out there considering trying that, let's say they're going to go today to the gym or tomorrow, you got to really reduce the amount of exercises you're doing, and you got to accept that you're using more of the muscle, so you're going to be extremely sore.
yeah. I would say that that's something you should be going into like with the trainer. You need to really know what you're doing.
Yeah, you got to have someone who knows that stuff good.
But like, what's interesting is that I think there's scope for probably like there is a place for it in golfers too, for definite. But I think we probably expose ourselves to higher eccentric loads in really fast sporting actions than we do, especially with the change of directions, than we do in our gym programs. So
Mm-hmm.
like working on stuff eccentrically can be very, very useful.
Yeah, and a lot of people don't understand that if you're a right-handed golfer, that your left side is your eccentric. So it's holding the force that's coming into it, where the trail side is almost pushing the force.
Exactly, and your backswing, you're working eccentrically
Yes.
for the most part. Like that's where you're lengthening. So I'd be interested. Like, what would be something really interesting to see is like if you train eccentrically, does it help how much force that you're able to produce in your backswing to help load up for your downswing?
Mm-hmm.
Is something that I would say would be really interesting. And that's one of the reasons why I think swinging left-handed is one of the good ideas if you're doing like speed stakes or if you're doing any type of rotational work, whether it's throwing a medicine ball or rotating with like a cable pulley or something like that. Rotating hard to the right in, say, like a left-handed stance, I think probably has some merits for improving how well and how quickly you can load into your right side on the way back as a right-handed golfer.
Yeah, it makes sense. Total sense. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
an area, like you said, it's not very well researched, at least from what I've tried to find, and it'd be interesting
And
to see someone like you
the,
that does some
the
research.
yeah, like the other thing too on that, like I'm not an I've looked into eccentric training quite a lot. I'm not an expert on it by any means. I can definitely see like where the potential for it is.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing that does make it quite tricky is from a practical standpoint, it's not easy to set up. Like it's not like it can be hard to set up exercises and really provide an eccentric overload, and it's risky. There's no doubt that it is more risky. Like if you're because you're dealing with weights that you probably have very little experience dealing with, and if you're not at a level of preparation and kind of understanding of what you're doing, it could be problematic. Like,
Oh,
you know,
very easily problematic. I could see
yeah,
where that would. I mean, when I did it, I had been training for almost 10 years,
yeah.
and it had looked into it quite extensively with some people I know. Yeah, when you do if you do any research on it, let me know. I'd love to hear what you're
Yeah,
seeing.
so what's actually interesting is I've been I don't know if it will happen for sure. Like I need to flesh it out a little bit more, but something I've been doing because this is technically like my off season as such, I've been doing way more eccentric overload stuff
Mm-hmm.
and trying to find ways that would be pretty easy for people to do it like in their own gyms or something like that, and maybe put together like an eccentric overload program for golfers that they can do in their own time, but it would be again aimed at like the more advanced person who's used to training, and you wouldn't be doing it during a competitive period or anything like
No,
that, you
definitely
know.
be off-season training.
Yeah, I think it would be something that would have a really good place for maybe like 6 weeks at the beginning of an off season when you're looking to really because the gains in strength and muscle mass can be very, very impressive. And I think if you do a block of that in your off season, it could be really beneficial for how much benefit you get from your your regular strength and speed and power training slightly further on in your like off season or preseason.
Oh, yeah, because I'm a big believer in that your nervous system is going to control how fast you can move, even if you train.
Oh
So
yeah,
if your
100%.
subconscious knows that your conscious doesn't know, or let's say it knows that you can swing fast, that your body can handle it, it's going to
Yeah,
allow you to swing faster,
yeah.
which is what most people are trying to do.
No, exactly.
Let me ask you about bands, because I know it seems to be prevalent. I have not ever prescribed to that theory that band now it can be good, but my understanding, and you can tell me if I'm wrong, is that the strength curve of a band continues to go up, meaning the amount of force needed to move the band goes up as the strength curve of the muscle peaks and then goes down.
It it would depend on the exercise because not all exercises have the same strength curve.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but with with bands, what's the bigger problem with bands is that they're just so hard to get the right resistance for what you're looking for, and also they're so hard to progress. So like it's if you're say if you have 6 or 8 exercises in your training program, how are you getting one band or a selection of bands to meet the exact load that you're trying to use for that exercise? And then how do you make it slightly heavier or how do you make it slightly lighter if it's too much or too little?
Right.
I think that's where the real big problem with them is.
The only way I could find out when I first started training was you either get a little closer or a little further.
Yeah, exactly. But that's limiting a little bit then too,
Mm-hmm.
like that's and it's very hard too to judge how your progress is coming from using something like that. Like what I know they're definitely useful, but what is much better than bands for most things if you can is a cable pulley machine, which you can replicate basically every exercise on, but the resistance stays pretty much constant.
Right.
They're usually a better option.
What so I you've written on this, and for you this will probably be an easy question. But what are some of the top mistakes you see golfers making in their training?
Number one would be, I think, forgetting that golf is like the golf swing is primarily a really high power activity. So it takes 2 seconds or less. You're producing essentially maximal force in minimal time.
Mm-hmm.
That will dictate the primary, what's called energy system, which is going to be ATP and creatine phosphate. That's not important. But basically, what's important is that if we're trying to improve, particularly if we're trying to improve power in the golf swing, like in trying to improve club head speed, most of the repetitions that we do need to be done under very low levels of fatigue with the maximum power being expressed in each rep. That's impossible if the reps in the exercise get too high. So if we use an example of like one that I talk about often is like a simple medicine ball throw off a wall, like a side on medicine ball throw off a wall. And we're throwing the ball and say if we consider what's my maximum force of throwing a 6 pound ball off the wall, my record. If I start going up and up in the reps during a set, I'm going to get tired and I'm going to be producing nowhere near that force. Mm-hmm. Even if I'm trying to throw as hard as I can, because the fatigue is kicked in, it won't be getting up anywhere near there.
It's not replicating the activity exactly that you're trying to improve.
So most people do reps that are too high, under too much fatigue, and then they're not able to move explosively as possible. It would be like training somebody who's trying to improve the 40-yard dash by running like 1 kilometer runs. You know what I mean? You're not moving at anywhere near the same speed, even though it's technically the same activity. Another one would be that golfers tend to get obsessed with things that look like the golf swing.
Mm-hmm.
So if a golfer sees something that's kind of like half rotational and they're holding something and they're turning, it's like, oh, that must be golf specific. Well, there's a big difference. Well, first of all, movement pattern, so that the way you're moving is only one element of specificity. You also need to consider the time that the exercise is being replicated, how much time you have to produce force, also how much force is being produced, and the sequence that you're producing force in. Oftentimes those golf specific, well, what people call golf specific exercises that you see, even though they might be somewhat similar in movement pattern, they're often being performed way too slowly with really small amounts of force being produced. So they're not really doing a whole lot to impact on the golf swing.
What would be an example of one of those?
Like really common ones are when you see people with like almost like Indian clubs or using bands that are way too light or cables that are way too light,
right?
And not moving them with huge amounts of force. So you can take almost the same exercise, but how the person is performing it, like the intent they're trying to move at, can really make it either beneficial or not so beneficial.
Yeah, it makes sense. Someone's trying to reinvent the wheel and do something out of the
Exactly.
ordinary.
Like the key is if you're trying to improve speed, that when every rep that you're doing, you're trying to move as explosively as possible, like your life depended on it, and that you're not under fatigue, that your power output hasn't started to drop off significantly.
Would that then necessitate you having longer rest periods in between sets?
100%. So, like most people do too high a repetition number per set and then don't take enough rest between sets. So, for example, I'll give like, so what would be really common is in a lot of the workouts that I prescribe after the warm up, we'd have what I say is the power section of the workout where we're predominantly working on power. Two really common exercises we've mentioned already. You might have a vertical jump
Mm-hmm.
and you might have a side on medicine ball throw. So, one for lower body power, one for rotary power. A lot of people would say to me, they're like, yeah, I did vertical jumps. I did 3 sets of 10 paired up with a side on medicine ball throw, and I did 3 sets of 10. If you do a set of 10 vertical jumps, the amount of drop off you're going to have from jump 1 to jump 10 is going to be like really, really severe. So if you consider your set of 10, set one or rep 1, 2, 3, you might be at max, close to max power. 4, 5, 6, you're definitely going to have dropped off. 7, 8, 9, 10, like you're going to be starting to get gassed. You're not going to be jumping particularly powerfully at all. Whereas what I would say to someone is do 3 sets of vertical jumps where all of them are at max power. Now stop. If you're pairing it up with your medicine ball throw, do 3 to 5 reps of the medicine ball throw as hard as you can, rather than keep going to 10. Take a break. That way you're not building up any fatigue. All the reps you've done have been at really, really high power. And what you can do to make sure you get enough total reps in is add more sets. So I'd often prescribe like jumps and throws, something like 5 sets of 3 to 5 reps,
Mm-hmm.
as opposed to 3 sets of like your 8 to 12 reps, where half of the reps you do are going to be under so much fatigue. You're not moving explosively and it's not going to help your power.
And,
They're great.
and the time of rest is what, 90 to 120 seconds, or is it more?
What I would say is way more. That's going to be hugely dependent on the conditioning level of the person. What's most important is rest long enough so that you're at full power or close to it for your next set. That's what's going to be really important. So what can be very useful for that, it's not easy for everybody to set up, but if you have some form of feedback to inform if you're at full or close to full power, that's what's really good. Like in say like more professional or collegiate settings, what they tend to do with something like that is, rather than putting an arbitrary number of sets and reps on an exercise like that, they know what your peak force is, and then they'd set some guidelines. When that force starts to drop off below a certain level, it's like, okay, we're getting fatigued. We're no longer training top end speed and power. We're really just working on endurance now. We're not getting any speed benefits from continuing this. We're going to stop because we don't want to be doing this movement slowly.
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. You're
Yeah.
you're doing an
So
exercise for a speed drill, but you're not getting the benefits of the speed. So stop.
So a way of bringing this back to golf would be if you have a golfer who's like swinging the golf club, hitting golf balls, and one of his main focuses is trying to improve his club head speed. And if we just say that his max club head speed is 100, so most of his swings are, I don't know, say 97 to 100 miles per hour, as most of his swings are. If he gets to a point in that training session where his swing speed is starting to drop below that, like we have a problem. He is not now working on his max speed
Mm-hmm.
because his capacity to work on speed for that training session or for that day is done. And like where that could be important for people is like the amount of rest time they take between balls or the total amount of balls they hit.
Yeah, when I write, it's strange. And I'll write programs, practice programs for students, similar to how you would do a training program. Here's your program for the next 6 weeks, and it will include, you're going to hit X amount of balls, and then you're going to hit another type of shot, or you're going to take some time off. You're going to do this, and they, most of them have absolutely hate it, and I don't care. You're coming to me to get better. You're not coming for me to say take this magic pill and you're going to drop your handicap by 5 strokes.
Yeah. Oh yeah, exactly.
Is there anything you see other trainers doing that just makes you want to throw up?
It's funny. I wrote out before you called me. I was just writing down some notes to try and keep me on track because I have a habit of rambling, and
it's all good. That's why I do long form.
one of the points on my list was don't put anyone else down.
Okay, we can skip. You don't have to.
No. We don't have to skip it. Like, so. The answer is I wouldn't say it's, well, yeah, I do see things on social media that I disagree with, but I never ever like comment on it or share it, because even though in my head I might be like, why, like going back to what I said earlier on, like, where's the rationale? Like, what is the rationale for this? If someone sat you down and said, why is this golfer doing this exercise? Explain the benefits compared to one of however many other things you could do. Like, how is this what you picked? But the other thing is that you just don't quite know the context. So I like to try and give certain people the benefit of the doubt as much as possible. Where I see it quite a lot, now I'm not saying it's what I do or that they're doing the right thing, but I've never experienced it, so I don't quite know exactly how I'd react. If a top 20 or 50 player in the world walked into me for a training session tomorrow and they told me that they were playing in fucking the FedEx Cup next week, all I'm thinking is, do not hurt this person. Like, you know, like they've already proven that they can win millions of dollars, be one of the best players in the world. Like, and I see some pro athletes, not just golfers, they're doing things in the gym and you're like, this is essentially a glorified warm-up routine. Like, they're not really training here. You know, I'm not sure how much stimulus in terms of strength or power they're getting from this, but like, that might not be what the person came in looking for. They might just said, I want to get a bit of a sweat on. I want to, you know, basically freshen my head a little bit. And that's something that I try to remember when I'm watching some videos that I don't particularly agree with.
Yeah, I would say the same. I've even stopped commenting on Twitter or social media.
Well, yeah, and like there definitely is certain things like that I see. There's one thing that I don't like, but that I never do and I never prescribe, especially if strength or power and not just getting the heart rate up and burning calories or warming up is the goal, but they often get loads of likes and shares on social media, is combining two exercises. So an example of that would be like someone doing, say, a step up onto a box, then they curl the dumbbells to their shoulders, and then they do a shoulder press overhead. Like, the load that they're using and the intent that they do in, say, each phase of the exercise never matches the benefit that they get from if they were using a load that they were only doing a step up with and they're accelerating as aggressively as possible. Because if they were, they'd never be able to get that load and do a bicep curl with it and then shoulder press it overhead. Or like another one I've seen is, and again, I'm not saying that it's not a good exercise, but it's just what exactly is the benefit. I've seen loads of people doing one where they're like sidestepping over a foam roller with their leg and then doing like a medicine ball or cable rotation. And I see, okay, there's hip mobility and then there's like a cable rotation, but I don't know why the two of them are added together, because it's definitely not the best hip mobility exercise you can do. And when you add in the like instability on the one leg from stepping over the roller, there's no way you can hold a cable that was as heavy as if you were just doing a cable rotation on its own.
Yeah, like I said, it seems like people try to reinvent shit, and
And
it's like,
a big one in golfers too is that there seems to be a tendency for, I don't know what the word is. A lot of people seem to gravitate towards doing exercises on unstable surfaces,
mm-hmm.
like wobble boards or Bosu balls or Swiss balls. I don't know why, like they do it, but if the reason is for increased stability demands, like getting stronger on an unstable surface, I'm not sure how much transfer it has to a stable surface, especially when you're moving at really high speeds, which you never will be on an unstable surface. And if you're trying to increase speed or power or strength, which is a byproduct of increasing force production, the unstable surface is definitely 100% decreasing how much force you can produce.
That
So I
was one
don't
of the
think it's,
things Doc Half told me. He said he was not a
yeah,
believer in unstable surfaces.
no, so I don't see, like, if you're training stability, it's like stability is very specific to how it's being used, like how it's trained is very specific to the adaptation you'll get from it. So standing on a Bosu or Swiss ball, I don't think is going to have a huge transfer, and the research would bear out it doesn't have a huge transfer to keeping better balance or stability when you're on a stable surface. And in most sporting actions, you're moving at such higher speeds with such higher forces compared to what you can do on that unstable surface.
Mm-hmm.
There's a huge disconnect between them anyway. And if you're trying to do something that's improving your speed or your power or strength, because of the unstable surface, the amount of force you can produce is way down because half of your resources are taken up by trying to stabilize and balance. It's not improving that either. So it's nearly a case of you're trying to get almost like a bigger bang for your buck by like, oh, let's work on stability and power on this unstable surface. Actually, it's not doing anything for your stability and it's making your power training worse.
Yeah, that probably one of the biggest misconceptions that most people have is that they have to do stability
And
training.
I know another point on that is that, and it's something where everybody, like, we get attracted to the sort of shiny object syndrome. Just because you see somebody doing something that's impressive or hard to do doesn't mean that it's worth chasing with your training. So, like, for example, if you see somebody standing on a Swiss ball practicing their backswing, just because that's really, really hard to do and requires huge levels of probably practice and skill to do that on the Bosu ball or whatever, or if somebody's standing on a Swiss ball and throwing medicine balls, just because that's hard and impressive doesn't mean it's beneficial.
Yeah, yeah, the bang for your buck is not there. It's like, okay, you can stand on a
Exactly.
ball.
There,
When was
well,
the last
there's
time you hit a golf ball standing on a ball?
exactly, and it's not even trained. Like there's loads of things that don't look like the golf swing that have a lot of transfer and are worth doing, but there's some things that might look like a golf swing are very hard to do, but they're not worth chasing with your training time. And that's where I think a lot of the unstable things go. When people say, man, that looks really hard, I definitely couldn't do that. They automatically think getting better at that will help me with my golf, but I don't believe in that.
That's why I got you on to tell people, hey, get your head out of your rear end. Do what Mike tells you. Let me. We. I don't want to keep you on vacation. I got it, but I do want to
Right.
briefly get on. You have embraced some technology and that you have a very cool app, Fit for Golf. Can you tell everybody about that?
Yeah, so I have a Fit for Golf app. It's not available on the App Store before people start writing to me saying that they can't find it. It's available through my website, but basically what the app allowed me do was put together training templates for people who obviously I can't see in person, and you can't see the same volume of people in person that you can help online. So from working with golfers for a long time and dealing with lots of them, you start to see patterns. Like I talked about earlier, most people need pretty similar stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I've written a couple of articles about the 5 pillars of golf strength and conditioning framework that I use to try and break down training programs. I've basically developed a couple of training programs around those 5 pillars, and shot the videos and developed them into training programs that are available on the app. That's been particularly useful for people who want some sort of resource to follow if they're working out at home or in the gym. It's, more cost effective than going to a trainer. I'm not saying like replace your trainer with the app, but obviously not everybody has resources or has trainers available. And that's been one of the things that's been kind of quite interesting and popular with the Fit for Golf, is trying to help people from a completely immobile capacity. So what I do with the app is that when people buy a program and they get the app downloaded, they get a message asking them to try, before they start the program, to record their club head speeds with a driver and 7-iron. And then at different phases through the program, so the two of the programs are 12 weeks, they get a reminder message to try and do it at the ends of week 4, the end of week 8, and the end of week 12, and try and chart their progress versus when they started. And like, that's something that's been really, really interesting and pretty cool, because you have people who you've never met but are following kind of templates that you've prescribed, and they're seeing, really good increases in their speed, and a lot of the time they're, feeling less aches and pains in their cranky shoulder or lower back. And that's something that's been cool, is trying to grow that and get people following real basic stuff that might help them.
Yeah, so for everyone listening, it's not in the App Store, but your website's fitforgolf.blog. Everyone can get all that stuff on there, right?
That's it. That's exactly it. Yeah.
And I'll have that in the show notes and in the description everywhere else. You also have a warm-up manual, right?
I do.
Ebook that they can use?
Yeah, so that's out much more recently than the Fit for Golf app. The reason that came about is that once the app got pretty popular, a lot of people got in contact to say, I like the programs on the app, but what exercises from it should I do to help me warm up before I play, or what do you recommend for a warm up before playing or hitting balls? And I was replying to emails and emails and emails, and then I said I should just put something together so that people have a resource that they can use. So the warm up manual is slightly different. It downloads as a video based ebook. So if you have an iPhone or iPad, it downloads to Apple Books. And it can download to the Google version of that as well. And it is 9 different 5 to 10 minute warm-ups that are slightly different based on the equipment you have or like to use, and also particular trouble spots. Like there's one that's body weight only with no equipment. There's one with a resistance band only. There's one with a golf club only. And then there's kind of slightly more specialized ones for people who might have issues with lower back, hips, or shoulders.
You got it all. You got all the tech stuff. No wonder you're so popular.
Trying.
You got the knowledge, and then you got the apps, the technology, everything. So, highly recommend everyone get on there and on Mike's site and check those out. I was looking at them the other day, and they're very, very good. Simple yet in depth, and very efficient and productive for golfers of any skill level. Let's jump to some rapid fire, because I know you're on vacation. You got family and friends to see at home, and I kept you long enough. And we could sit here and talk for hours and hours, I'm sure. So if you're ready, jump into the rapid fire real quick.
Yeah, go ahead.
If you could caddy for anyone in history, who would it be?
Oh man, that is a good question. If I could caddy for anybody in history, I think it would be Padraig Harrington. It's popping into my head.
Fellow countryman, eh?
I would love a round on a golf course with Padraig Harrington.
That'd be pretty cool.
Yeah.
If you weren't a fitness strength coach, you would have been a what?
That is tough. That would show you how little I thought about it.
All your eggs in one basket worked out good for you.
Yeah, just let me think. What else would I like? Oh man, I am stumped. That's probably a good sign, though.
Well, you diversify workouts. You got to maybe diversify your personal.
You know what the answer? You know what the answer is? Probably a golf coach.
There you go.
When I was in school, we had to fill out. I presume it's the same in America. We had to fill out a form where before we call it the leaving certificate, which is kind of equivalent to the SATs.
Mm-hmm.
And for a while on that form, the like PGA course to become a teacher was number one on my list ahead of sport and exercise science in UL. But then that changed as I came closer to finishing. But I think it was probably a good idea. I had to have become a little bit better at golf to pass the playing test anyway, I think.
Well, maybe it saved your sanity because, like we talked about earlier, a lot of your stuff is science based, and up until maybe a dozen years ago, most of the stuff in the golf industry is theoretical, and you get in these heated debates, and no one would have any justification of their theory like they do now.
I do love golf coaching though. Even like I really enjoy if I have a friend that's like a complete beginner and you're showing them like even real basic stuff, or they might even ask you like, why do you use a 60-degree versus a pitching wedge from this situation, or should I use like a 5-iron or a 9-iron here, like, and like should I set up to them the exact same way? Like obviously I'm not giving golf lessons to anyone, but even helping buddies and stuff like that when they go play for casual rounds, or if I go to the driving range with them, I really, really enjoy that. Something I've thought about a little bit before, like would I ever like to try and transition into some coaching later on? I don't know, but yeah, I would say golf coach.
Well, I would say without hesitation that that understanding the swing and understanding the body obviously go hand in hand. So if you're in one field, starting out, so to speak, or helping out people in the other, it is not that drastic a transition, in that you have to, especially in golf, understand how the body is designed and then how it's designed to move. Otherwise, you're just going to gravitate to a theory and try to fit everybody into the same box.
Yeah, exactly. And I even love with golf too, like whatever about the swing knowledge, I like how you can kind of break down the different compartments on it and, look at, say, your kind of statistics. It's almost like a mini project. It's like, I'm currently a 5 handicap and this is my, scrambling percentage from inside 20 yards. I wonder if I got it to this percentage, what will happen, my handicap? Or, I'm putting one ball out of bounds every 2 rounds. I wonder if I change that to one ball out of bounds every 4 rounds. The way you can sort of do a little bit of analysis on what's going on. I like that, like analysis, like nearly like training programs, analyzing if we improve this in the gym, will it improve their sporting activity? It's like if we improve this aspect of the game, will it improve my score? And then developing a training plan around that. I like that.
Yeah, I mean, Mark Brody brought that to everybody's attention.
Yeah, exactly. I'm a huge Brody fan. I've read his book a couple of times and actually use his app as well too, the Golf Metrics one for tracking scores. It's cool. It can be slightly depressing, but it's cool.
But at least you're facing reality. You know what you got to get better at.
Exactly. Yeah.
Let's see here. Caddy or cart?
Oh, caddy. By the thing that I dislike most about golf in the US versus Ireland by far is the amount of riding on carts.
Yeah, it's killed caddy programs, and in my opinion, it's hurt the future of the game.
But in Ireland and the UK, courses just don't have cart paths. You just walk. It's just grass.
Mm-hmm.
There's a cart path, but like it's for the maintenance staff. Like most courses don't have carts available. Like you're walking and you're carrying, or you're walking and you're pulling a trolley, like a pull cart.
Right.
There's way prefer it. So yeah, definitely caddy.
Well, you enjoy. I mean, it's meant to be enjoyed. If people are doing it for enjoyment, get out there and enjoy it instead of seeing how fast you can get around. Let's see, cavity back or blade?
Oh, I prefer blades. Like looking down on blades and hitting blades. I use kind of something in between a Mizuno model. It's kind of a forged cavity back. I think it is a JPX 850, but really like blades.
Good, cool. If you could change one rule in golf, what would it be?
Change one rule in golf. In terms of playing golf, the first thing that's jumping to mind is maybe the divot in the middle of the fairway. Mm-hmm. I think that's a little bit tough. I know there's the play it as it lies, but I think it's one thing getting a horrible lie if you hit it way offline. If you hit it exactly where you're aiming and you get a terrible break, Like, I think that's tough. The other thing that I think probably needs to change is dress code.
You mean people are dressing down too much,
No, no,
or more relaxed?
I think it should be more relaxed.
Oh yeah, some of the courses I grew up playing, guys were out there in cutoff jeans and tank tops.
Yeah, I think it depends. Like, I think that there's still an element of, like, in very few places where we go now are you like required for a certain level of formal dress, if you know what I mean.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's something that might affect golf. But I'm not an expert on that, but it's just something I think, especially for kids, especially kids.
Yeah, I think Ricky Fowler's done as much to help kids dress a certain way as anybody else, at least in the
Yeah.
modern era that I can
No,
remember.
I think so, yeah. But I think it's going that way. Like, do you think? I think eventually they'll probably do like the shorts on the PGA Tour if they brought them into practice rounds. It's a matter of time, probably.
Yeah,
And
it's like, why
even,
not?
yeah, you see some players as well, that are starting to wear like the hooded like pullovers and stuff like that. I think it's gradually
A
changing.
little
But
more hip.
yeah, exactly. And it's not a case of like wearing whatever you want. It's just, I don't know if stringent dress rules are that good an idea going forward. But
Mm-hmm.
I'm not an expert on that. I'm open to correction on that, definitely.
Let's see, 3 bucket list courses.
Three bucket list courses: Augusta, St Andrews, and I'd really like to play Lahinch in Ireland, which I haven't played yet.
Yeah, my brother said that was an awesome course, one of his
I
favorite in the
try
world.
I tried to reserve a tee time when I was coming back for this vacation about 6 months ago, and they had nothing for me.
Hmm.
So that'll tell you that it's busy.
Let's see, if you could win any tournament in the world, what would it be? Could be a local tournament,
But
could be a family tournament, big time, whatever, any tournament in the world.
um, I'm gonna say the Masters. Most people go British Open when they're from this part of the world.
Mm-hmm.
I think a Masters is I think a Masters is the coolest.
Yeah, well, you get to go back every year too.
Yeah, yeah, I think that's cool. Now, when we hang up the phone, I'm probably going to think of some amateur one, like my local club's like Open Championship or
Right.
something.
Well, I
You
mean,
know,
so
but
sometimes people will say, because I've asked that question a lot, not just on the podcast, and mostly guys will have a get together of the guys they grew up with, and they all get together and play a tournament once a year where they have guys weekend and just drink and play, and that tournament to some of them is the most important tournament in the world.
yeah, like club golf in Ireland is huge. Like kind of club team golf,
Mm-hmm.
either alternate shot or kind of like 5-on-5 singles match play. If I was still playing in Ireland, there's two competitions called like there's the depending on your playing level, there's the Senior Cup and the Barton Shield and the Junior Cup and the Bruin. Like they're almost like your Ryder Cup equivalent when you play club golf in Ireland, which would be very, very cool. But I'd probably still just give the nod to the Masters.
Yeah, I don't think you're alone. In fact, most people have said the Masters.
Yeah.
Most
What's very cool actually is a guy, a 22-year-old that lives pretty close to where I'm from here. He just won the amateur championship, so that gives him playing rights in this year's British Open, and he gets to play in Augusta next year
mm-hmm.
and the US Open. And like he's a guy who would have been playing in all these tournaments, like you'd know his name from around and you'd have like seen him play a little bit. And I know a lot of people that are reasonably friendly with him. So it's just going to be a regular guy from close to where I grew up
Yeah,
playing
it's
in the
pretty cool.
Masters next year, which will be cool. So that is cool.
Let's see. Most influential person in your life was who?
I would say it. My parents and my older brother. It's hard to put one on them. Probably my dad. I'd say my dad.
Okay. Your dream foursome has got who in it?
Um, Padraig Harrington, Ronan O'Gara, who is a former Irish rugby player. He played out half, which is kind of like the quarterback for American football. Like they're sort of the most influential one.
Mm-hmm.
And geez, trying to think. Give me 1 second.
Take your time.
Let someone come here. I'm stuck. Maybe Tiger. It'd be cool to see Tiger play up close. Like, I think I think he's played the best golf ever. I know people say, is it him or Jack? Jack is more major. I think Tiger probably played the best golf ever. It'd be cool to see that.
Well, that's the next question. Who's the GOAT? Tiger or Jack?
I think Tiger.
Okay.
Now, I might be affected by the recency bias in that, like, I'm only 28, so I don't remember Jack playing at all. So it was all Tiger when I was growing up. But I don't know, from like the statistics I've read and stuff like that, I think Tiger's probably played better golf, but Jack has won more majors.
Mm-hmm.
And people might argue winning more majors is better golf, but very hard to compare. I say Tiger, though.
Yeah, James Bubba Kruger, who's a FootJoy ambassador, amateur ambassador. We had that. He asked me. He turned the question around. And I said, "Well, I agreed with what you said. That Tiger has played the higher level of golf, but it was in a shorter time span. Jack extended it out for longer. So I say you can talk. Yeah. And I did say if Tiger, if he gets that majors record, which I think is going to be very hard given his body and his life, right? He enjoys time with his kids. It's going to be much, much harder. If he gets there, then I don't think there's any question.
Yeah.
One more. When you hit a bad shot, what's your go-to curse word?
It begins with B and ends with X.
We'll leave that one at that. If we have this conversation 3 to 5 years from now, what's different?
Probably everything. I'd probably have rethought all this stuff. I don't know. Let me think. To be honest, on a serious note, I would say probably not that much. I think I'll still be reasonably similar. Like, I'm at a stage in my career where I'm only really getting started. Like, from 28 to say 31 or 33 is not hugely different in terms of the stage of your career you're at. Maybe I'll have had a chance to work with like more high level players, which I haven't done a huge deal of yet. Suppose the ticking time bomb would be, will I have any kids? That's probably the big game changer in that time frame from 28 to 33.
Right. Yeah, I'm sure. Hey, you're too good at what you do. The better players are seeking you out. I don't think that's any question on that one.
Hopefully. Hope you're right.
All right. If someone wanted to reach out to you, schedule a session, training session, you do a lecture, presentation, what's the best way for him to get a hold of you?
Email is the easiest. So fitforgolf18@gmail.com. And then Twitter is definitely where I get the most kind of response and where I put the most out for my social media stuff.
Okay. Are you? And the handle for that is what?
At fit_for_golf. So fit for golf with an underscore between the words inside of the 4.
You're on it. They can follow you on Instagram and Facebook too.
Yeah, Instagram is the same handle, and then Facebook, which I use very sparingly, is Fit for Golf.
Awesome. Hey, Mike, thanks for the time. I mean, we've gone through a hurricane over here, and you're across the ocean over there, and somehow we made it work. If somebody doesn't take a couple things at least away from what you said today, then they weren't listening or paying attention. But thank you for the words of wisdom, and we got to do this again.
Yeah. Thanks a lot for having me on, Pete. And I know that when I listen back, there'll probably be a couple of things I didn't explain as well as I would have liked to. But if anybody has any questions, like about anything that we talked about or questions in general, that email is a good place to follow up. I can try and do things a little bit more clearly if necessary.
Yeah, and in the description, I'll have all your handles, your email, your contact info. So if anyone wants to get a hold of you, you just got to click the link in the notes and the description, and it'll be all over my social media. I'll give you the links as well as soon as it's edited and put together. And this has been awesome. Thank you so much.
Yeah, perfect. Thanks a lot, Pete.
All right, enjoy your vacation. All right, everybody, thank you so much for listening to today's show. If you enjoyed it, you can find more information on today's episode and other topics at golf360.blog. There you'll find the show notes and links related to this episode, as well as any other episode that we've done so far to date. If you're interested in improving your game and would like to learn more from yours truly by taking a private lesson, a half-day or multi-day school, club or putter fitting, you can reach me through the blog site or by email, pete@golf360.blog. So some of you may be asking, what is the golf paradigm? All you have to do is click on the homepage while on my blog site to discover how you can start playing better than you ever thought possible. Or you can simply sign up, again, on the blog page for my instructional videos where I give regular tips on all areas of the game to include the swing, club design and fitting, health, fitness and nutrition, the mental aspects, and equally as important, the integration of all those things together. I'm also on social media, and you can find me at The Golf Paradigm. That's Paradigm, and I'm on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. And don't forget to subscribe to my YouTube channel, also under the same name, The Golf Paradigm. Facebook is usually the best way to reach me for questions and or comments, and I look forward to hearing what all of you have to say.